Am I live? I think I'm live. That's a good introduction to a show. Am I live? Hello, everybody. Welcome to the show. My name is Chris, and you're watching the Weekly Spinnerack, a weekly show where we talk about comic book news and comic books. And there were some really interesting ones that came out this week. Well, I kind of say that every week, but I was pretty excited by some of the things that I read this week. Last Mermaid continues to just stun me with how enjoyable this is to read. I think that this two-pack of Radiant Blacks here, this was the best two issues of the Catalyst War arc so far. Really, really cool. And you know what else did we get that was new? Oh, Absolute Power is DC's new event. We'll talk about that tonight. There's a bunch of comics here that I want to talk about. I even tried one of these new, what is this called again? It's called something like Compact, I think. DC's Compact Comics. So I'm pretty excited to talk about that. I've got a small sketch that we might be able to draw because my wife stepped in. She was the hero, folks. She got me a new HDMI cable. The last 2 weeks, I've had trouble getting a second camera to like focus on the comics that I read or what I draw. Like I've got a second camera set up over here. It was the HDMI cable. She got me a new one, bumping my microphone. And so that was really nice. She's the hero that will make this a good episode. And if it's a bad episode, let's blame her too. No. Let's see what we've got. I just want to give some shout outs. I'm scrolling back and we'll just start blasting through these. I don't even have time to read them all, but I want to at least acknowledge everybody who shows up at the beginning. That's the least that I can do, and I always believe in doing the least amount possible. Hey, it's my sister. I'm seeing lots of familiar faces and a few new ones, which is always nice. Thank you, folks. I appreciate that. This is part of what's fun about it, is to not just talk about the news or talk about a comic, but to like actually riff on things with you folks. I'm seeing a lot of interest in things like both Radiant Black and The Last Mermaid. And for those who might not be reading it yet, yeah, it's really good. Oh, thanks, Mike. That's so nice of you, buddy. Hola. Acknowledge me. I did acknowledge you. I'm going to take one moment to grab a sip of Diet Mountain Dew because I need some caffeine. Thank you. That's my energy. I didn't have too much of this over the weekend. I don't know about you folks, but here in the Seattle area, it has been very hot lately. It's been in the 90s, and on top of that, no cloud cover at all, 0 clouds in the sky, and no breeze, just no air at all. So, and I have a part-time job. I work every weekend outside. It was rough. I drank so many bottles of water yesterday, especially, and I thought, good, I'm keeping myself hydrated. But then last night I had one of those things. I don't know if you guys have ever had this. When you're dehydrated, it can happen where your calf muscle in the middle of the night while you're sleeping just locks into place. Just becomes like, all of a sudden it's like diamond strong. Oh, that wakes you up fast. Had to like get out of bed and like massage it, loosen it back up. Oh, it was rough. And that tends to happen when I'm dehydrated. So I thought I was drinking tons of water, but I guess still not enough. Brutal. Let's see what else. Oh, before we get started with the news, I remembered one thing I was thinking of talking about last week that ended up slipping my mind. I just wanted to sort of react to the fact that there's a new Hellboy movie trailer, live action Hellboy. And first of all, there's some good things to say about it, and there's some things that like make it a little iffy. But first of all, I'll just say like congratulations to Mike Mignola for doing a creator-owned comic that has now had 4 live action movies made based on it. that is, first of all, a huge accomplishment to have that level of interest outside of just the successful comic that you made. This is another sort of fresh start on the material, and some of it looks very good to me, and one or two things I'm questionable about, but I've definitely also learned not to judge things until they actually are out. I'm just talking about my initial response to the trailer. Oh man, personally, like Hellboy's one of my all-time favorite comics. So good, so good. Love it. Absolutely love it. Yeah, a few people have mentioned things that I need to have for electrolytes, including my sister. So, yeah. The directors of it have made two movies that I really liked, Crank 1 and Crank 2 with Jason Statham. Very funny action movies. And then they did the Ghost Rider sequel, which I thought that they would be really good for, but it was pretty low budget. It was kind of boring. I didn't feel like that they had enough, money to do a bunch of big action sequences, which is sort of what a superhero movie needs. So I worry a little bit because I can tell that this Hellboy also has a smaller budget. But the story they're basing it on, The Crooked Man, is a nice sort of one and done supernatural mystery, and the tone of it, a lot of the shots look very effective for giving it a horror vibe. I'm like, okay, this is a little more intimate as compared to epic for Hellboy movies, but that's in keeping with a lot of the comics. I can go with this. The look of Hellboy himself, I'm like, it's not outright bad, but I feel like I've seen cosplay at Comic-Cons that are potentially superior, but it's hard to know until you really see it in action, Yeah, Rob, if you haven't seen it, Crank 2 is still pretty damn good. If you guys don't know, Crank is like Jason Statham's like a hitman or something. It's a long time ago that I saw it. And he gets poisoned, and the only way he can keep that poison at bay until he finds the antidote is to regularly get adrenaline. So he's running around the whole movie, just like doing drugs or just crazy stunts and things like that to just get the adrenaline spike up and keep himself alive. In the second movie, he had like a criminal steals his heart because his heart is obviously so strong, and they put a temporary one in there to keep him alive during the surgery. He wakes up and escapes, but now he has to regularly give himself big jolts of electricity. So it's ridiculous. It's ridiculous, but it's pretty good. Oh, cool. Thanks for the super chat, Steve. That's so nice. Thank you for the support. That's really, really nice. Anyway, we'll see. I'm curious. I'm just talking to you. It's just my face. Maybe this isn't interesting, and you need like a real reactor with like showing like the full trailer, and every once in a while my head comes in from the corner and goes like, "Oh, didn't see that coming." Give it some real Sniper Wolf-esque commentary reactions. Huh? How about that? But anyway, oh, cool. Hey, Andy. Always good to see you here, man. Always good to see you. Yeah, that's my understanding, is that they're the directors of it. So anyway, we'll see how it goes. It looks different than the last 3 attempts, but it could work. It could work if it leans into being a horror movie a little bit more than anything else. We'll see. Let me bring up the news. I don't have as much news as some weeks, but I think I do have some interesting stuff for us to all talk about, which I think should also be interesting for people that are watching this when it's not live. So, one of the things we will get to, as you can tell by this thumbnail that I kind of smashed together pretty quickly, actually, we'll be talking about Absolute Batman. Very different look for the character, but we'll get to that. We will get to that right now. How's that for a transition? Just to be clear, I've got the watermark here in place. Want to give credit. This came from Bleeding Cool. They got the scoop. They got the scoop of this photo. And what that is, well, you can probably read it. It's a San Diego Comic-Con ash can. We talked about ash cans on the show recently. They're just sort of meant to be, more like just get the copyright done initially. That was the point of an ash can. Just to be clear, ash can is a really old word. It's literally what people used to call garbage cans, probably because people used to smoke like chimneys in the 30s. So yeah, but Bleeding Cool was the only people that I saw that found this cover, and there's just a few interesting things about that to talk about. So Absolute Batman. Going to be given away in some form by DC in 2 weeks. I don't know if that's just at a panel or if they might have copies at their pavilion. I don't know. But here's some of the things we do know. I say no. It's more like there are rumors that we know about. Absolute is rumored to be a brand new continuity using DC characters. The closest thing we can come up with is the Ultimate Universe at Marvel. It isn't, just to be clear, all the existing DC stuff is continuing as well. This isn't starting fresh like Crisis or New 52. It isn't that kind of a thing. This is happening alongside. It's a separate, brand new take on the ideas, which I think we can see a little just from the cover. We're getting 3 books in this Ultimate line, and supposedly they're all overseen by Scott Snyder. Scott Snyder is definitely writing the Batman book. Superman will be done by Jason Aaron, and Wonder Woman by Kelly Thompson. So they definitely got some of the biggest name writers that are working right now. And if you don't recognize this style, that's Nick Dragotta, and Nick is a hell of an artist. My favorite thing that Nick did was with Hickman, East of West. If you haven't read that book, really great post-apocalyptic take. It's a Western, but it involves the mythology of like the horsemen of the apocalypse. It's a really cool book. East of West. Really recommend it. But Nick's done other stuff. He's done some Spider-Man and some other Image stuff. Look, when we look at this Batman, we've seen different takes on how big the ears are or exactly how the logo is drawn. But this guy, look at him. He's humongous. And that isn't just Nick's style. Nick can draw all sorts of body types. He's not like, say, Ed McGuinness that likes to draw big, beefy dudes, or Simon Beasley, like some of these artists that just draw everybody big. Yeah, I think so that there is a little of that, Rami, just because of the shading. It looks like a very homemade Batman costume compared to a billionaire's costume to me. When we look at this, I mean, it's barely a bat symbol. It is, but it's like it's just almost like a block, a patch, and it's almost like the stitching just sort of gives it like the faintest impression of a bat outline. And then obviously, instead of just a regular cape, he seems to almost have glider wings, glide, very specifically glider wings. So it's interesting, there's some differences there. I don't see I don't know what the term would be, but those sharp angles that Batman usually has on his forearm gauntlets, doesn't have that. It's different. It's different. Yes, maybe somebody just threw a brick through Bruce Wayne's window in this universe. He's sitting there contemplating late at night in his study. Criminals are a cowardly and suspicious lot, but how shall I strike fear into them? Now, in the original continuity, a bat breaks through his window. He's like, a bat, I've got it. I'll be a bat. But in this one, somebody just literally threw a brick. He's like, hey, you damn billionaire, help the rest of us out. And he's just like, a brick can be scary. I will be the Brick Bat, not realizing that Brick Bat was a golden age enemy of superhero number 711. Real thing. I made a Comic Tropes episode about it. I'm curious to learn more. We don't really know what the story is or exactly what the reboot entails, or what the differences are. I feel like if you're going to reboot it, we've seen so many takes on Batman maybe don't even make it Bruce Wayne. You know, have the idea of Batman, you know, a normal guy fighting crime, but maybe he's somebody different this time. I don't know. There's a lot of different ways you could still go with the idea. Every book could benefit from a Daniel Warren Johnson cover. Yeah, sure. He'll poop bricks. Brickbat versus 7-Eleven may have been your most obscure reference ever. It is and it isn't, just because people that watch my show might have watched my episode. I maintain that is the best Golden Age superhero comic I ever came across for like weird ones, is number 7-Eleven. His name, his whole methodology of voluntarily being in jail because he looks like his best friend who is a criminal, and then tunneling out to fight crime at night, and then going back to jail every day. I just, so much of it doesn't make sense. I adore number 7-Eleven. I wouldn't change a thing about it. I don't know, but you know, I'm giving all my reactions. What about you guys? Does the idea of more Batman intrigue you because it could be very different? Does it intrigue you because of the talent involved? Do you feel burned out? Like, hey, you know what? No offense, there's too much Batman out there. I don't know. Oh, yes, please look up on Comic Tropes, number 7-Eleven. It's hashtag 7-Eleven, but yeah. Batman, Batman, Batman. Anyway, I think it'll look interesting. It will look interesting. I think it looks interesting. I'd like to know more. I'll probably check it out, A, because I've got a show, but B, I do like Scott Snyder. I do like Nick Dragotta. That's enough to get me to check it out. But it's such a different design, really, for Batman. The closest thing that I can think of is Frank Miller's Dark Knight Returns. You know, that was the first time I saw Batman just built like, you know, a brick shithouse. But anyway. You haven't bought Batman regularly in decades. Lots of people come in and out of books like this. But this is a fresh start. I'm curious. Absolute has become DC's new word, like crisis was. I felt like that they got to a point where they oversaturated using crisis too much. But now I agree, because they've got their absolute editions, which is just a nice name for a fancy hardcover. They've got their current event, Absolute Power. And then they've got, you know, this Absolute Universe. Maybe there's a connection there, and that makes sense, but it's a lot. It's a lot. That's really cool. I love Detective Batman. I hate superhero Batman. This looks like the latter. I mean, I guess I could sort of see what you mean, because it's emphasizing the physique, but it's too soon to know for sure. It's too soon. Next comes with a vodka tie-in. Oh, Absolute. Right. Yes. It'll be Absolute, and it'll just be like about a guy that lives in the DC universe who really enjoys drinking Absolute vodka specifically. Not a drunkard. He can still be a good person. He just really enjoys a nice drink. All right. Not much more to say, since this is basically just all we've seen so far. The rest is rumors. We'll obviously have tons of comic book news in 2 weeks when San Diego Comic-Con has wrapped up. Oh, sorry, I almost forgot this little note. Apparently, stores are also being sent some version of this book as well. I haven't heard anything from the comic stores I go to, so I don't know if that's something they've received yet, or if they'll sort of be receiving it in 2 or 3 weeks. I don't know. But there was something in the ordering catalogs for a version of this book. So we'll see. As long as I've got a bunch of DC news this week, so I'm going to stay on the DC tip for a minute. No cap. That's right. I'm Gen Z. Surprise. You thought that I was old, but I'm Gen Z. Dog. That's DAWG, by the way. Harrison Robinson returning to Starman. Well, there's a Gen X title if there ever was one. But Starman, if you haven't read it, it's pretty great because it's kind of a complete beginning, middle, and end of a superhero story. But it's like a superhero story where the character refused to wear a superhero costume. So, this comes from gossip at this past week's London Film and Comic-Con. And I'm sure that we'll hear some firm details at San Diego, but the rumor is that DC is going to have a Black Label Starman series. So probably a limited series aimed at a little bit of a mature audience, although Starman always felt, it was a Vertigo book. It wasn't very skibbity toilet of me. I understand. Let's see. I liked Starman. I'm excited at the idea of the creators, the actual creators coming back to it. So, yeah, that's the next thing I've got here is that James Robinson, the writer, Tony Harris, the artist, they're the guys that created this version of Starman, and they're the ones that would be coming back to do this new Black Label. It was like a Vertigo series is probably what I meant to say. Sorry if I stuttered on that. I was straight bussin'. Thank you, Xavier. So Harris and Robinson created this guy, Jack Knight, and he was the son of the Golden Age Starman, who was Ted Knight. They created that all the way back in 0 Hour, which is basically a crisis event, but they didn't use the word. Well, no, when they released the trade, I think they did call it 0 Hour, a crisis in time. Maybe that was even the subtitle on the original issues. It was a crisis book. Anyway, yeah, so that was back in 94, and they had a series from 94 through 2001. I want to say 81 issues. I'm not quite remembering if they had annuals or anything off the top of my head, but it was something like that. It was a long-running series. He inherited his father's cosmic rod. That gave him powers, but he didn't dress up like a superhero, so that was cool. And then, like in today's continuity, the powers and stuff went to Stargirl. If you know her, she was the second Star-Spangled Kid, if we dig deep into DC lore, but none of that's super important. You've been reading the compendiums. This is the cover of Compendium 2. So yeah, the compendiums are a good way to read it. Really, really cool. Really, really cool book. Yeah, I guess that's all I got to say about Starman. But I also want to talk a little bit about DC expanding some of their new lines that they've introduced, including the one I was just talking about. These are compact comics. They also have reprinted archival editions of some of their best comics, and they call that DC Finest. And apparently both of these lines are going pretty darn well. So in January, DC will release archive editions of these 3 books that I put images up of. That they each come out weekly, like January 7th, 14th, 21st, or something close to that. $40 each, or $39.99, whatever. US. But I like the choices that they've got. They've got Supergirl, and it's some of the fun stuff that Otto Binder wrote. Otto Binder also wrote a lot of the best Captain Marvel stuff. Really built out both the Captain Marvel family and the Superman family. Really did some fun, goofy, but fun adventure stuff. This is, I think, probably still my favorite Green Arrow arc, The Longbow Hunters by Mike Grell. Really good. Like, took Green Arrow away from just sort of being a Robin Hood skin of Batman and made him a very grounded hero, very, very street level, very political, really, really cool. Really, really cool. And then Aquaman has some of the best Ramona Fradon stories. I've always talked up how much I like Ramona Fradon. So all 3 of these are pretty cool. These 2, Supergirl and Aquaman, fun, goofy, sort of 50s stuff. This Green Arrow, this was the grim and gritty period of the 80s, but it really is some of Mike Grell's best work. Mike Grell, very underrated writer and artist, very underrated. I think not enough people think of him these days, but very talented, very talented. Warlord. What else did Mike Grell do? He did a great James Bond story in the 80s. Really, really cool. They're also, on top of the finest, they're releasing some more of their compact line. So I don't know if any of you guys have seen these in the stores. They released some of their biggest titles, like, All-Star Superman, Watchmen. I want to say the Batman from New 52 by Scott Snyder and Greg Capullo. I tried this one, Far Sector, which is a Green Lantern book. Really good value. They're about like 5.5 inches by 8.5. Not quite typical manga size, maybe a notch bigger than that, but really like pocket size, just about like in jacket pocket. $10. $10 for 12 issues. It's a good value. $10 for 12 issues. Here are the ones that they're going to be releasing in the future. Kingdom Come, Static Season 1, Deceased. That was some recent event, like a zombie event. Batwoman Elegy, Superman Birthright. That's always a consistent back issue bestseller. And Superman Batman Book 1. Not quite sure what Superman Batman Book 1 is, to be honest. But anyway, those are coming out May through July of next year. That's an interesting question. When would I do? I did one Captain Marvel episode, and I think it was written by Otto Binder. So because I feel like I did an episode where I talk a bunch about him. I'd have to double check, though. It's been a few years. I like the new compact comics. I mean, oh yeah, that's right. Mike Grell did Shaman's Tears at Image. That's right. Oh, and actually, didn't some of those also come out through Marvel's Epic line? But anyway, I mean, $10 for 12 issues, I think is a fantastic deal these days. I think that's just, that's going to be hard for people to not give a try. So if you haven't, I definitely recommend, if you've somehow never read All-Star Superman or Watchmen, for $10, I don't know how you can go wrong. Birthright is good. Took the Golden Age Superboy story of Lex Luthor losing his hair and modernized it. Right. Warlord is really strong. Warlord's really strong. Yes. The thing it would be closest to, I think, for Longbow Hunters would probably be Frank Miller's Daredevil. Sort of the same era, same, real violence. Like where instead of he doesn't run around with trick arrows as much as he just shoots people with an arrow, and that's pretty serious. Ooh. The gutter loss in the middle. Yeah, I sort of see what you're talking about there. You're right. Like that is kind of tight binding, but the pages spread apart okay at this size, so you can still pretty much see everything. Something to think about for the future, though. What else do we got? The main man, the last Zarnian, Lobo. We're getting the Lobo Cancellation special. I hope it's fun. One of the early books I remember getting that I thought was like, oh my God, this is so edgy, was the Lobo Paramilitary Christmas special. I want to say it was by Grant and Beasley. I think it was by Stephen Grant. It's hard to remember, but it was fun. It was, and this looks to be in that vein. Yeah, I was thinking that's the most likely thing, Rob. I'm not 100% sure, though. Anyway, what is this? The Lobo Cancellation special is coming out September 25th. Who's working on it? Kyle and Kyle. Kyle Stark's writing, Kyle Hott's drawing, and a variant cover by Simon Beasley. Even all these years later, if you say the name Lobo to me, the first thing I associate that with, Simon Beasley's art. That's just me. He's done a lot of other things that I love too, but he's the first person I think of, the first thing I think of when I hear Lobo. So cool. So cool. And by the way, let me just say, Kyle Starks he's just a really good fit because he writes all sorts of genres. including like horror and sci-fi and superhero. But he's really funny when he wants to be, when it calls for it. Really, really funny. Really, really funny. DC's solicitation doesn't really tell the plot. It just says that it's going to be the scummiest comic this side of Uranus. There's a thinker of a joke. One thing I liked about what Kyle Hotz did with the art on this is he posted the cover to his Instagram recently, and with that he had video of the process for inking it as well as coloring it. I love process videos that artists, whenever they're willing to make them and post them, I love that stuff. Even like sped up, it just gives me an idea of the creative process for that creator. I love that. And I hate to say that it's like, it shouldn't be needed, but with the prevalence these days of people using AI tools, I think that if artists from time to time did a live stream or uploaded short videos showing their creative process, it would certainly give the average reader, some confidence that this was real art being created by hand. I mean, even if it's digital, you know what I'm saying, like by hand with a still like a tablet or something like that. Yeah. The first thing you think of is with Lobo is that vote, the fight between Lobo and Wolverine. DC versus Marvel had some interesting matchups, not always super satisfying results since it was fan voted. Wolverine beats Lobo, but the fight is just like maybe like 3 panels. They wrestle and fall behind a bar, and you hear like a sound effect, and then Wolverine stands up and is like, "I won." It's terrible. It's terrible. They needed more space for that. But when you do the vote, the trick is, what, you gonna hire the artist to draw like almost 2 full comics in 1 month? I mean, depending on where the votes go. So what they do is that what made it unsatisfying, if you don't know, is that all the setup is all the same, but then the actual fights were pretty short. Ugh. What else do we have for news? Last week I said that we'd be getting more news on the Kingdom Come documentary at San Diego Comic-Con. Alex Ross had posted, just a teaser saying that there would be a documentary based on one of his most famous comics. We learned a lot more about it this week, actually. So The Wrap was the first to break some of this news. They got to show a trailer, and now it's on YouTube, but there's a trailer for this upcoming documentary. It's about the making of Mark Waid and Alex Ross's book, Kingdom Come. Great comic. I'd always be interested in hearing more about what the creators went through for decision-making process, and especially with Alex Ross designs, because he redesigned just about all of the characters. And some of that stuff became pretty iconic. Look at this S on the Superman of Kingdom Come. Definitely influenced by Golden Age Superman, but that's more or less the S that they're using in the James Gunn Superman movie. So, some of this stuff became pretty popular. It's a good book. So the documentary is called The Legend of Kingdom Come. We heard that the director is a guy named Remzi Atassi. One of the producers on it, Sal Abinanti. He's the business manager and the art dealer for Alex Ross. So this is basically coming from Alex Ross's people, this documentary. So that starts to make sense. But what I was a little surprised by is this is going to be a Kickstarter. So they've got a link here already, and apparently in the fall, that's going to go live. And it promises that it's got interviews with both Mark Waid and Alex Ross. And I was a little surprised that it's going the crowdfunding route. Wouldn't have thought that was necessary. Sincerely thought that this was an independent film that, or that it was Warner Brothers. But no, it's by the actual creators. That said, it is the kind of thing I would personally be interested in. I backed the Hellboy documentary. That was a great documentary. If you haven't seen it, like there's a Mike Mignola Hellboy documentary. Mike Mignola's more than Hellboy, but it's great. It's great. That's very kind of you. Thank you. Why hasn't there been a Superman with the cool S? What? What do you mean? What's the cool S? I missed it. Kingdom Come is just, it's really well executed. It tells a specific story. It doesn't linger. I want to say it was only 4 issues. It gets in and out. 4 big issues, but still, it was really well done. It was really well done. And since I'm mentioning a Kickstarter, this is one that I saw a notice go up for this week. Larry Hama is going to do a Kickstarter. I'm in the bag for Larry Hama, folks. One of my favorite writers. So his G.I. Joe run at Marvel, Skybound just had a Kickstarter to fund some compendiums. It became the most funded comic book project in Kickstarter history. Well, what better time after wrapping that up than for Larry Hama to launch another Kickstarter? And I hope it, does well for him. I've heard that the Dave Stevens documentary is good. I need to see it still. Haven't seen it, but I'd like to. Anyway, yeah, so Larry Hama, this is what he's doing. The teaser text says that Mountie David Lawrence battles ancient werewolves in the Canadian wilderness in a 48-page debut issue. That was interesting that they say debut. That implies there's more to this story. It's a massive accomplishment. Now, there have been a couple comics that have had more supporters because the comic wasn't as expensive. This was, an expensive Kickstarter for compendiums, but it's still humongous. It was a humongous Kickstarter. But yeah, I trust Larry to do this. Larry's good at still making realistic characters. He doesn't go too goofy. Even though this sort of is sounds initially like a goofy premise. I'm like, no, I'm willing to do it. We'll see. The art is by Guy Dorian Sr. I have to admit, I think I've seen his work, but I'm not super familiar with him. I looked it up. He broke in doing New Warriors a long time ago. He's done stuff for IDW a bunch. G.I. Joe, ROM. They had ROM for a long time. Maybe they still do. So we'll see. And it hasn't launched yet, but here's the link if anybody wants to look it up later or just, search for it. No, not published by Dynamite. And Dynamite doesn't necessarily rely on Kickstarter. I think that a lot of publishers have started using Kickstarter and Indiegogo as tools. Why would you use that as compared to just soliciting it? For the simple fact that you are speaking much more directly to the audience and you know exactly how many need to be printed. It's just a new tool. I don't begrudge comic publishers, established comic publishers at all for utilizing crowdfunding platforms. I think it's smart. Do the Mounties morph into horsemen? Horsemen? Wear horses. They could. Or maybe they just power up by downing some Molson and maple syrup. I don't know. It kind of has become that. I don't think that was the initial idea, but it really has become that. I mean, there's always going to be some distribution costs. Why not give some of those distribution costs to Zoop, to Indiegogo, to Kickstarter, if you can effectively get the comic directly to the people that are most directly invested? Because sometimes those are for comics that aren't going to have as big an audience if you just solicit it to comic book stores and have them guess. It depends. It depends on the people involved, I think. You know, I adore Larry Hama's run on Wolverine. I think it's fantastic what he did there. And it's certainly nice that for a big chunk of it, at the beginning, he had Mark Silvestri at what I would consider like his absolute height. Just great. That's a great detail. And I love the your avatar. Yeah, Drawing Monsters. Great documentary. So glad I supported that yeah, it was a Kickstarter. It was good. Alan Grant. The name Grant was sticking in my head, but I couldn't remember. And I think I said Stephen Grant, and it didn't feel right. But yeah, Alan Grant sounds right. LCD, yes, and Albert, the robot Wolverine. He created a lot of interesting characters. Did a lot of good stuff with Nick Fury, with Sabretooth, with Lady Deathstrike. Really used them well. Really did. Yeah, he also got to work with Adam Kubert for a bunch of that run. Really good. Liked it. Shifting from G.I. Joe to something he's well associated with, I want to talk about Skybound's new G.I. Joe initiative, but this is for their Energon universe, which is not Larry Hama's continuity. There's two G.I. Joe continuities. There's Larry Hama's that has been running since 1982, and there's this new one that also crosses over with things like Transformers and Void Rivals. So let's talk about this initiative, because this is a chance for you to appear in the comic book very easily, to be honest. So from now through September 8th, Skybound and Hasbro has launched this Choose Your Side between Cobra and G.I. Joe. And if you participate, your image will get printed in a future comic. In this continuity, she's not necessarily a good person. She's been a mercenary, but as this new G.I. Joe continuity starts, she has signed up to work with G.I. Joe. Yes, there are some differences. There's a lot of classic characters. There's also a few new ones, like this guy. So that's kind of fun because it helps make it a little less predictable. And one amazing thing is, they've been doing basically a bunch of mini series to establish their world. This one, Scarlett, is out right now. They still haven't used their biggest character, Snake Eyes. We haven't seen him at all. That'll be huge when they finally introduce him, because Snake Eyes is definitely the most popular and most fleshed out character in G.I. Joe, but they've been building a whole continuity without him, and I think that's smart to make it without relying on such a big character. So how do you get in the comic if that's something you'd like to do? So readers will pledge their affiliation. You just basically are choosing G.I. Joe or Cobra. You submit a photo of yourself, say which side you're on, and you just have to sign up for one of their free Skybound Insiders accounts to do that at this website. So if that's something that interests you, now what are they probably going to do? Probably like a few pages in like the letters columns with 20 or 50 photos to a page, just setting realistic expectations there. And they said that as many issues as it takes, whoever submits their image and participates in this, you'll get that image printed in the comic. I don't see any rules about, say, cosplaying. So if anybody out there in, say, The Finest, that's a professional G.I. Joe cosplay group, or even do it yourself, maybe you could submit something fun like that. Quinn is such a great character, but you know what? I assert that, to me, that's a Larry Hama character. Anyway. The first trade of Daniel Warren Johnson's Transformers came out. Yes. I believe it did come out about a week ago. So yeah. Yeah, it's good. Maybe I will submit. I hadn't really had time to think about it, to be honest. I grabbed the news, but I haven't had time to think about anything personal. I've just been working. We'll see. Do they know how many issues of each series there will be? I wonder how long Daniel Warren Johnson's run will be. Transformers, Void Rivals, and G.I. Joe have all been solicited as ongoing. So it'll go as long as people want to read it. as to how long Daniel Warren Johnson himself will be working on the title, don't know. Don't know how long he signed up for. I really hope he stays on it, at least as writer, because I think he and Jorge Corona are doing a fantastic job on it. Really do. I really, really do. You know what? There's another comic that does allow you to have something like that printed, Shin Matthias. Feral. You can submit pictures of your cat, and they print them in the back of the book, the comic Feral, which is a current monthly book. Issue 12. You're guessing that that's when Daniel Warren Johnson will be on the book through? He mentioned he will be working on Transformers until issue 24, according to the Triple Takeover podcast interview he did. And I wouldn't be surprised if he extends that contract beyond. I think that Skybound does recognize what they have there. They went after Daniel Warren Johnson pretty hard. I don't want to give away personal details that aren't mine to share per se. That's Daniel's story to tell. But they approached him and they wanted his take. And I don't think that I don't think that they want to give him up very easily. There's plenty of great people out there that could probably do an amazing job, but I think that they do see, the numbers are there. We'll see. Steel Brigade, yes. Be your own G.I. Joe. Just to be clear, a little less obscure, there was also a Create a Cobra. Not as common, but yes. I made one of the Steel Brigade figures back in the 80s. I called myself Whirlwind. I was a kid. I was a little kid. I thought it was such a cool name. It doesn't make much sense. Yeah, I can understand that that concern, Moritaka. And what I would say is, if you haven't read the Larry Hama comic, I would say it very much is not military propaganda. The sort of one superhero type element to it is that all of these, best of the best service members work together perfectly. They treat each other like friends and comrades. It's not about really big beefs between them, but the comic never really glamorized the fighting. And while the cartoon had to be a lot more aimed at kids, the G.I. Joe comic from Marvel, IDW, etc., that Larry was writing would have real stakes. They would lose team members, they would die. They would have allies die. They would have sometimes innocent civilians. They would lose battles sometimes. It never really made the fighting glamorous and cool and yeah, go America. They were it was fantasy in the sense that they got to go up against terrorists that were very clear-cut supervillain type terrorists, and a little bit of sci-fi too, just to be clear. The cartoon, maybe even the toy, I think you could argue that there is some sort of jingoism, American jingoism, beyond propaganda. But I always felt that the comic really balanced that well. And then this new Energon Universe comic, I just want to say, is a little more sci-fi. It's in a world where there is Energon and transforming robots and aliens and stuff like that. And some of these team members, like Baroness, is not an American. There are other people that they're gonna work with that are not. It's not about just America is great. It isn't. So anyway, just my take. I know I might not convince everyone, but I really believe that G.I. Joe is better than you might think if you haven't read it. It's really, really cool. It's really cool. I can understand those concerns. Yeah, I can. So once Hasbro sort of ended the G.I. Joe Real American Hero line in, I believe 94 was the last year of that, there was very briefly a there were a couple different sort of G.I. Joe reboots, and Dark Horse actually had a G.I. Joe reboot with a Frank Miller cover on the first issue. Yeah. Anyway, let me wrap this up. To be eligible for if you want to participate in that, I just think it's a fun thing for fans. You got to have a verified Skybound Insiders account. You have to be over 18. You can't agree to contracts if you're under 18. And you have to be a resident of the US, the UK, or Canada. And here's something that this is why I put it in. Excluding Quebec. I'm not a Canadian. I've always heard that Quebec is very different from the rest of Canada, but why would there be a rule there that people from Quebec couldn't participate in this? They must have some sort of rule or law. I don't understand. Anyway, I don't know. Right. I definitely understand the concern. It was the 80s and there was a lot of propaganda at the time. Like the first Rambo movie, definitely not propaganda, but Rambo 2 and 3, like super propaganda. So I get where that idea comes from. I do. But I wouldn't say that G.I. Joe falls into that. I don't know. I know it's the French-speaking region. Oh, is that true? That might be okay. What Jeff said, I don't know if you were joking or serious, but I think you are serious because I bet that is a rule. I do know that they do speak French there, and I bet you that might be some sort of a rule. I don't know. They might have certain like regulations, like this has to be in French for you to participate in it. Quebec does have a different legal system. That I didn't know. That's interesting. I would like to read up on that now that you're telling me this. Dude, if eating poutine gets you excluded, I'm excluded because, well, I don't eat it anymore now that I'm sort of diabetic, but I love poutine. Poutine is fantastic. Okay. Rebellion are the people that publish 2000 AD and other comics in the UK. They have some incredible guests, in my opinion, coming through them. They're going to be at their booth for San Diego. Listen to this. So first of all, I just wanted to point out, if you're going, this is where they'll be. Booth 2121, okay? 2000 AD / Rebellion. They've got Simon Beasley, Kevin Eastman, and Gail Simone. That's a really interesting mix of great guests. And I was a little surprised at the Kevin Eastman one. I don't quite understand that connection. I mean, I know that he was the publisher of Heavy Metal, and does that mean that Rebellion has the rights to Heavy Metal right now? I just don't know. James, thank you so much for adding that. I never knew that. I mean, I knew it's part of Canada, and I just assumed that meant that you had all the same regulations and laws, minus, here in the US, different states might have very slightly different versions of, how driving regulations for speeds or on highways, or, like little things like that, like when a bar needs to close. I don't know. Yeah, it wasn't the names. Then so the first and third one that I list do make sense. Simon Beasley, guy from the UK that has history doing stuff for them. Totally, I get that. Gail Simone also does make sense. I'll explain in a minute. Kevin Eastman is the one I was a little surprised. So, they've also got a few exclusive books that they'll have there. They've got a new version of Rogue Trooper Blighty Valley. That was written by Garth Ennis. I do forget the name of the artist on that. I'm sorry. I should have written it down because I don't remember. A new cover by Francesco Francavilla. They have, I always thought that this was supposed to be pronounced Slanya, but apparently it legit is pronounced Slain. I didn't know that until recently, but Slain, the Horn God. they're having a 35th anniversary reprint of that great, sort of fantasy action book, and they'll have Misty, their new 48-page horror anthology, which is overseen by Gail Simone, and that's why she's there. That makes sense. Misty used to be a horror anthology aimed more at women in the 70s, I want to say, and they're bringing it back. I think that could be very, very cool. The artists that they've got for this book look insanely talented. They really got the top tier of artists for this book, so should be good. Should be good. Saga Returns. Saga is a fantastic comic, but I am a big fan of both Brian K. Vaughan and Fiona Staples on whatever they do together. I think that they've got a great epic sci-fi story. Just so good. So good. But they take hiatuses sometimes, and they've taken one recently. It's coming back. Image has solicited issue 67, cover scene here, returning July 31st. That's pretty darn soon. Might look like Flipper, but look at the back legs. That's an alien, baby. Saga is going to return for what they're calling its 12th season, as now 12-year-old Hazel, she wasn't even born yet when the story began, embarks on the most important adventure of her young life. I'm curious to see where they go. The story has always been told from the perspective of Hazel, like Hazel's narrating it and telling us everything that happened in the past to sort of get her to wherever she is at this unknown future. But this will be interesting, seeing her sort of just on the precipice of becoming a young adult. The last issue was back in September of 2023. So it's been on a bit of a hiatus, not quite a year. But if they need hiatuses to keep producing good content, I'm fine with that. I like it when the same creative team stays on a book, when they've got a specific story to tell. I sort of get the idea of fill-in artists on monthly superhero books. Those are periodicals that are never intended to really end, right? So you just got to keep it going, keep people invested. But yeah, I do have one or two Chainsaw Man volumes, don't I? Where are they? You can see them. Oh yeah, right there. You can see that? That's a pretty high resolution camera. How are they only in the 60s? Well, they took a big hiatus after issue 55, which was their or 54, I want to say, their halfway point. They took a hiatus for a couple years to do other things, refresh the creative juices, but they have it mapped out for probably a little over 100 issues. So we're like we're at this point we're coming up on 2/3 of the way through the story. Yeah, for creator owned, it doesn't really make sense to do fill-in artists. You might have like a change of a creative person for an arc or a flashback or something. It depends, but I think you want to have the same team. This brief hiatus is still better than that All-Star Batman hiatus. Hey, there's books that like supposedly went on hiatus that have been longer. Let's see. That Ultimate Hulk versus Wolverine by Damon Lindelof. I don't think that ever got finished. Did Kevin Smith ever finish his Bullseye miniseries? I don't think that ever got finished. And I think that I'd have to add it up, but there's some manga done by basically one creator that have gone on really long hiatuses. Hunter went on several really long hiatuses. Vagabond by Takahiko Inoue is supposedly on a hiatus. It's been on a hiatus for a long time. I think she did have a baby during one of the big hiatus. I'm pretty sure she did. Yeah, Age of Bronze. Eric Shanaway, right? Yeah. Miracle Man, there's plenty of books that like say that they're going on hiatus and then just never come back. So who knows? Thank you for confirming. I didn't think he did, but like, you know, if he did, I probably wouldn't have caught it because I knew it had been so long. Well, Berserk, yeah, I mean, but that one's a little more unique, isn't it? And it is still technically ongoing right now. It's just taking... The Ultimate Hulk Wolverine did complete? Did Damon Lindelof come back with Leno Francis Yu? That's interesting. Anyway. There have been a bunch of comics is all I was trying to get at that definitely went on super long hiatuses. Even if one or two of those did finish up, they were still on a, you know, multi-decade hiatus. That would be interesting, potentially, wouldn't it? Comics that went on a hiatus and exactly why, as well as like maybe why it didn't come back. There could be a lot of little stories there to talk about. That's an interesting idea. Maybe I will. I don't know Cooperhead. I don't know that one. The manga Freezing is technically on hiatus. Considering the author's other works, it's effectively abandoned. Yeah, that happens sometimes. I was trying to think of stuff that's pretty well known, because there are some pretty well known books that just never got completed. Anyway. There would probably be less to talk about for ones that did eventually come back as compared to ones that went on hiatus and never finished. No, I'm not. That's the current Ultimate Universe. I'm talking about the old Ultimate Universe. There was one issue that ended with Hulk ripping Wolverine in half, and I didn't know that did come back. I didn't realize that. Somebody says that it did, so I'd have to look up what the details on that. That was a fun little thing. Oh, another thing for Saga. If you haven't read it yet, maybe you want to get in on this. They're going to be releasing new 6-inch by 9-inch editions, collecting 6 issues at a time. First one of those is coming out September 24th. So another decent way to get in on it if you prefer like a compact format. But that said, you can get the first compendium of issues 1 through 54, and it's something like, I don't know, $25-$30. I forget exactly what it is, but it's a great deal, just to be clear. It's a great deal. I don't know how many of you caught this this past week, but Rolling Stone, still a very big magazine and big website, they did a huge article on Steve Ditko's life. And if you haven't been to Rolling Stone, at least in a long time or ever, you probably will get to read it for free. They're one of those places that does put up a paywall after you've read like 1 or 2 articles. So if you start reading it, it's a long article. Don't abandon it and come back, because it might paywall you. And I think, you can put things like that sometimes in reader view to get past the paywall, because I'm not always convinced paywalls are fair. But this is just interesting. It's not like we're learning that much that's absolutely new, but this article did come out this past week. I've got the link for it down here, and it talks about it discusses Steve Ditko's private versus work life, and it's got input from his brother Patrick and his nieces and nephews. So it's his actual family talking about who Steve Ditko was. He was a very private person. He didn't do interviews. He would write letters. He would write letters back to fans or print maybe sometimes a small essay in his comics, but he didn't do interviews. And he only did one convention appearance back in like the early 60s and then decided it wasn't for him. So, he wasn't on panels or things like that. So there's not a lot out there in Steve Ditko's words of who he was as a creator. But if you're curious, his family has a lot of stuff to share. I thought it was pretty darn interesting. the article talks about how he really kept his work life in New York City completely separate from visiting his family in Pennsylvania. Like he'd go visit them on holidays or, family events and stuff like that. He was there, it was a drive, it wasn't that far. He, or a bus ride, what a train ride, but he stayed in touch. He never married or anything like that. He never had kids, but he stayed in touch with, his siblings and his nieces and nephews. And from their accounts, he was great. He was really nice, but he wouldn't talk about his work stuff with them, and people that knew him as a work person never really heard him open up about his family life. He kept those completely separate. Very, very unique guy. Very unique guy. I think he was a good guy to the people that he worked with. I've got an episode on this if you don't know much about him, but Steve Ditko was a staunch adherent to Ayn Rand's objectionist philosophy, which essentially boiled down to, in terms of his comic book work, he would, if he took the job, he would give the amount of effort that he felt that the paycheck justified. He would not just always try to give it his best. Like if Charlton paid him, lower page rates than Marvel and DC, yeah, he'd get the work done on time. He was a professional, but he wouldn't really go into the same level of detail and stuff that he would for something that paid more. And he absolutely refused to do a story that didn't agree with his morals, and he wouldn't be difficult about it. He would just say, no, thank you. That's not for me. So, one last thing that I had never heard before, though, was the article says that it was Stan Lee who introduced Ditko to Ayn Rand's books and philosophy, which, if that's the case, I bet he regrets that, because it definitely cost him Spider-Man's artist in a way. At a certain point, but who knows? That probably would have fallen apart no matter what. Like, I don't think he liked how much credit Stan took, and Stan honestly said some pretty mean things in the letters page about, like, Ditko said that, he wanted to write this issue, so if you have a problem with it, don't complain to me, complain to him. And like, he gave him a credit, something like, stingy Steve Ditko. I'm making that one up, but it was something kind of mean. It was like, well, how did you expect to keep this guy if you were going to treat him like that? You know what I mean? And I don't think Stan was ever like a big objectionist. I'd find that very hard to believe. But he had just read one of her books, was like, it's kind of interesting. You know what? Stan was like, you know what, Steve? I think that this is something that you might find interesting. Yikes. Yikes. Oh, thanks for watching it. I haven't, I've never rewatched it. It was a long time ago. I hope I got it right. There are stories about Ditko hanging out at Marvel offices after he left a title. He would discuss philosophy with anyone. He sounded friendly, not as difficult as people made him out to be. No, apparently, he believed in black and white, no gray area. But from everything I read in interviews and stuff, I've never heard about him being difficult to work with. He just would simply say, like, look, tell me what it is. Okay, I'll do it. I'm a professional. Here's the work. Tell me the idea. I don't agree with it. No, thanks. Not for me. That's my understanding. And it probably cost him a lot of opportunities, but whatever. Whatever. Oh, I've never heard that. I can definitely, in my opinion, see some of the objectionist views in Zack Snyder's movies, especially like Man of Steel. But yeah, I didn't know that. Right. Yeah. I think a lot of people, that's sort of their entry. They're like, hey, Fountainhead was like a decent story. And then they get into like her other stuff, and it just like, if you, yeah, it can take you down a path. Objectivist. Thank you. I knew I was like, I said objectionist, didn't I? That sounds like somebody that's difficult at a courtroom hearing. I'm a sovereign citizen, Your Honor. I'm an objectionist. Objection. You don't have the right to govern me. Objectivism. Thank you for the corrections. Yes. I'm not perfect. Surprise. All right, we'll keep going. We're almost done with the news, actually. I want to talk about some comics. Raina Telgemeier and Scott McCloud. Those are two big names in comics in my world. I think that, the amount of books they've each sold, those are big names in cartooning. Well, they're teaming up. Scholastic's graphics imprint announced that they're going to publish this book, The Cartoonists Club. That's going to come out April of next year. It's by both Telgemeier and Scott McCloud. And it's, I guess these two are real life friends, the creators. And so they decided to make a comic book about friends, some kids sort of becoming better friends through comics, through making comics. It says that it follows Michaela, Howard, Linda, and Art. They each sort of are described as having different skills, like a lot of ideas, but don't know how to like turn that in, like can't draw, or really creative but doesn't have good ideas, etc. Like those kind of things, and how they can all work together, and how they team up and learn how to make better comics together. I think that sounds like it'll be big, to be honest. Just about everything these two release does sell pretty damn well. The two of them together on a book like this, I could see that being very interesting, not just to young adult readers, potentially to just comic book fans like that are even older. They might just be like, I want to see what these two have to say about making comics. I could see it working. I am like so grateful to somebody like Raina Telgemeier for introducing so many new readers to comics. Are they going to read just manga when they get older? Are they going to read just superhero stuff? I don't know. But they'll usually keep reading comics. Marvel's announced what they're giving people for Trick or Read. They are going to offer 5 different comics to retailers, and the retailers can give those away on Halloween. It's basically the same system as Free Comic Book Day. If you don't know, those are never free for the retailers. They're sold at a huge discount, but the Free Comic Book Day and Trick or Read books are still something that your local comic book store is buying from the publisher. The publisher is probably like, maybe even selling it at a small loss, but they don't sell it for absolutely nothing. So just so you know. But yeah, as far as the books, Fantastic Four 13, that's probably my biggest recommendation out of these 5. I think that the run by writer Ryan North is fantastic. This one involves a parallel world with dinosaur versions of all the Marvel superheroes. It's really fun. It's a good sci-fi mystery as well. They'll also release Spider-Boy #1. That's been a huge book. That makes sense. I don't know what happened in Venom issue number 21. Maybe it was the start of a new story or something. Star Wars Age of Resistance Kylo Ren. They always do a Star Wars book, so I guess that makes sense. And then one for younger kids, Spidey and His Amazing Friends #1. Yep, it is. It is. Oh, you didn't read the ending? Boy, great. It's really fun. It's very satisfying. I think it's great. I think it's good that they've got something not just in May. I think October is another great time where kids sometimes are going around for candy, and some of them, depending on where you are, sometimes it's not safe to do that in certain neighborhoods or something. I think it's great that comic book stores can have something very specifically themed to give them. Kid gets a free comic, but it also might interest people in reading more. Thank you for the super chat. We started off the show talking about it. Yes. Personally, I'm just really interested in a straight adaptation of a Hellboy story in movie form. I was saying that's the part that I like the idea of the most. If they're going to do it low budget, which is understandable. That's the economics of it. I think that adapting a specific story that's like sort of just a smaller horror-based story with interesting mythology behind it is a good idea. I think that the idea behind it makes sense. We'll see. Thank you again for the super chat. Very kind of you. Do you folks need these in your life? These are Deadpool Noisemakers. Deadpool Noisemakers, It's a perfect impression. So comic book stores are currently able to order bundles of 10 of these. It's Deadpool and Wolverine themed. Clearly, this is meant to promote the movie. These will be in stores, comic stores, July 17th. They should be free. I don't know. I guess some comic book store might try selling this. That would be weird, but they could. There's nothing else that I had to say about it. Just putting it on your radar. If that's something that you're looking for, if you love the idea of not just making noise, but also having Deadpool or Wolverine or Dogpool's face in front of your face while you make that horn-like sound, this is for you. This is for you. Hey, I have gotten more mileage than I would have expected from the Marvel Blood Hunt giveaways of the fake teeth. I think this is the 4th time I've used these, so that's pretty good value. I'll do the rest of the show talking like this. That isn't annoying, right? Yeah. What fun. What is the 8 Deaths of Spider-Man? Not a lot to say about it. A few things. Marvel released this image here on the right. Focus on this first. I'll talk about the context of this in a minute on the left. But on the right, they put this out. So, it's called The 8 Deaths of Spider-Man. It says it's a 10-issue series, and it's going to come this fall. We already knew from last week that Joe Kelly was going to be taking over as writer after Zeb Wells wraps up his Spider-Man run. So here's what we've got to see. Marvel released this, which confirms it's not just Joe Kelly. It's also Justina Ireland as the writer. So they're writing this together, I guess. And more than one artist for the 10 issues. We've got Ed McGuinness. We've got Gleb Melnikov. And it says, and more. So that's interesting. I don't know. Maybe the story is told from multiple perspectives and so it benefits from more than one artist. I don't know. As far as what this means, these are my questions. Like the 8 Deaths of Spider-Man, I'm like, okay, is that like a metaphorical death? Is that deaths of people important to Spider-Man? Because I started thinking of that and I'm like, okay, we've got like Captain Stacy and Gwen Stacy and Uncle Ben, Harry Osborn. I mean, he's back right now. I don't know. You could list a bunch of important people that are deaths in Spider-Man's life or something. The 8 deaths that influenced him. Well, that's the way I was leaning anyway. But then this was the last page of last week's Moon Knight Fist of Khonshu #0, which is mostly about Mark Spector returning as Moon Knight. But there's a 5-page backup Spider-Man story just talking about sort of the events of Blood Hunt and what happened with Mark Spector from Spider-Man's perspective. He's having a conversation with Spider-Boy. Not super important. Yeah, exactly. Gene DeWolf, another important person. At first, spiders do have 8 legs, so I get the number, sort of. But the end here makes it sound very literal, okay? Because look at how it teases the next event. This ends, it doesn't really matter what they're talking about, and it just says, Spider-Man will return and die in the 8 Deaths of Spider-Man. So, I don't know. I don't know what that means, Are we getting clone deaths? Are we getting multiverse? Spider-Ham is going to die? I don't know. Spider-Boy has been pretty popular, just to be clear. It's not for everybody, but it seems to definitely have connected with some slightly younger readers. And you know what? Good. That's fine. So anyway, it sounds like the end of this teaser text, Spider-Man will return and die in the 8 Deaths of Spider-Man. That sounds like it's very literal. So I don't know what they mean by that. I'm just gonna say the ad is enough to make me curious. Is this going to be a good event or an event that I like? I have no idea. I really don't know if this is for me or not. But I have to admit that the title gets me a little curious what they mean by that. I'm not I'm not so naive as to think like, wow, they're really going to kill off Spider-Man and that's it. They'd never do that. But what do they mean here? And would it have any ongoing repercussions even for a while? I'm curious. I'll just say that I'm curious. You know what, Andy? You might be right. I don't want to. You're willing to go out on that limb and say he'll probably get better. I'm not as convinced. I think that no, Marvel's like, we don't need him anymore. We've got Miles, we've got Spider-Ham, we've got Spider-Gwen. Let's kill off Peter Parker. I think that that's what they're going to do. Rashomon, 8 villains claim to have done it. That is a great idea. I doubt that's what they're doing. But you know what? That is a really cool idea. What if you had, I'm going to go deep into Marvel lore, the bar with no name. That's where supervillains hang out and talk with each other. What if you had a bunch of supervillains that all believed Spider-Man was definitely dead, and they each told it from their perspective, and each one isn't quite accurate, but there are commonalities across so that you can figure out the true story. A Rashomon story of villains thinking that they had killed Spider-Man or that Spider-Man had died and piecing it together is a great idea for a story. Well, yes, they did. You're right. They did. But it's still a good idea. They did. Was there a good Fantastic Four story like that? I can't think of it off the top. But yeah, you're right. Batman the Animated Series did sort of do that idea. Almost got him, something like that. It still could be executed well. That it's not a bad idea at all. All right, last piece of news, some manga/anime news. Uzumaki, one of Junji Ito's most famous horror manga, and it's long been in development as an anime here in America by Adult Swim. But we got a little bit of an update on it this past weekend. So, if you don't know, these are some things we already knew. It's going to be 4 episodes. It is going to be in black and white. There's been like a teaser trailer showing it. But this week they announced its English voice cast. They announced that at Anime Expo. They also confirmed, without a specific day, they said that it is coming out this year. You know, we're more than halfway through the year, so not that far away. Here's some of the people. The main character in the story, if you don't know, it's a girl named Kirei Goshima, and it's about, the story is just sort of about her and her friend figuring out that their small coastal town is like haunted by spirals. Like it just makes people do crazy things and turn into weird, it's body horror a lot of times. So anyway, here's just some of the people. I don't know these actors, but it shows you like what they've been in. Okay, Abby plays Nezuko on Demon Slayer. Okay, that's a huge get. Robbie Daymond, Megumi on Jujutsu Kaisen. Anyway, I'm just going to go through because I don't know these names, to be honest. But these are people that, and their credits. So... we will get this before Grand Theft Auto 6. We will get this. It's been a long time, but yeah. I also like the idea that they're doing it in black and white. I hope it comes out well. If they just do a literal adaptation, it should work just fine. It's body horror is something you don't necessarily need lots of like shock value, boom, like, you know, you see something, because it's not necessarily gore. It's just like perversions of like what's happening to a body and stuff like that. the Netflix series is, well, it's an anthology series, so it's a little hit and miss. I liked some of it okay. I wouldn't call it exceptional. I'd say that the comics were better than what they adapted. Anyway. Well, anyway, that's who they got. Yeah. I haven't watched I've read some Demon Slayer manga, but I haven't watched the anime, so I guess I didn't really think about that. Oh, man. David Cronenberg probably, his he did a movie like a year, maybe at most. It was 2 years ago. It was okay, but I think he's mostly retired. But his son is also a director that does some good body horror stuff. Maybe his son should direct a Junji Ito adaptation. Robbie Daymond played Spider-Man in Spider-Man Unlimited and Batman in the Batman 2004 series. Oh, those are some huge credits. Anyway, that's what I had for news. Let me take this off now because that's all I had for news. And give me a moment. I'm gonna pull up my camera. Thanks to my wife getting me a new HDMI cable. My wife. Let me zoom in a little before I talk to everybody. I'm going to move this a little. Maybe I'll move it a lot. Just give me a minute. This part always takes a little longer because I could have the camera ready, but it's going off of its battery when I set this up. And if I go too long on the news, I could theoretically kill off the battery. So I usually just sort of wait until it's time and then just spend a few awkward moments adjusting things. There we go. Great success. Yeah, that's fair. So somebody asked, am I going to talk about Neil Gaiman? I'm going to wait on that basically because there was Neil Gaiman news, and it could be real. I'll say for right now, I believe it, but I'll also say that the source that it came from, I don't trust at all. It came from a very weird right-wing podcast. And I'd just like to see some confirmation from a source that I trust more than that place so that I can get details that I feel are reliable to talk about. Until then, it's a rumor. But since I'm talking about it, I'll just explain what the rumor is. There's a podcast that released 4 episodes. I want to say it's called Tortoise something. I listened to 3 of them, and then I bailed because I didn't feel it was being very I didn't believe it, the way they presented the podcast. I'm not saying that I don't believe the alleged accusers, but the podcast presents it in a very confusing way for me. But there were 2 people, according to the podcast, they alleged that Neil Gaiman was sexually abusive towards them. I don't know. It's really awkward because I don't want to sound like I'm not believing something true. The podcast itself, if you have to listen to it and make your own call on this one, it's a really unique story because they keep reading off texts from the woman that alleges this stuff, and a lot of them are after the supposed abuse, and she's saying we're good, it's fine. So I'm like, I don't understand. There are news articles that make it sound very clear cut, but I guess I'm having trouble parsing that news story. So I didn't feel like I put it in. I've basically said what I'm able to make sense out of it. We'll see. It's a really awkward position because I did post about it at first saying I was confused, and a lot of people said, it's very easy for you to say you don't believe victims because you don't trust the source. That's very convenient. And I was like, maybe you're right. I don't know. It put me in a very awkward position. and I'm trying to be at least upfront about it since it was directly asked of me. I'll say that I guess for now, that's so wishy-washy. I believe it, but it's hard for me to pass on the news until I feel like there's something a little more firsthand account from somebody that's a lot more impartial as far as a news source goes. It's very strange. And by the way, the podcast is behind a paywall also, which I think just, it means that they want the clicks, so they're doing something clickbaity. They just are. There's no question that they are doing something clickbaity. But sometimes, because I started listening and it just played it. So it's supposedly you're supposed to pay for it, but it worked for me. We'll see. I just want to be a little careful right now, folks, on this, because, I mean, look what happened with Ed. And I don't want to dwell on that. It hurts me too much. But things spun out of control very quickly there. So I think I just, and one of the things Neil does have in a text is he's saying, like, I heard that you think I, R-worded you. She'd reached out to him first, and he's saying, like, well, I heard that you were saying this, and I'm honestly feeling like, like I might just end it. And she's like, no, you misheard. That's not what I was saying. And I was like, oh, well then. It's very confusing. I'll report on it if I can get a source that summarizes the accounts directly from these victims. Okay. Anyway, let me get to talking about comic books that came out this week. I'm going to do this and that. But I'll start with what? The ones I really want to talk about are like 3 different books. Absolute Power, I have some things to say. The 2 Radiant Black things I have to say, and The Last Mermaid. I don't think I have as much to say about Last Mermaid other than sort of glowing praise. So I'll just do that one first. I love this book right now, and I want to put that out there each time, even if it sounds a little repetitive, because I want a book that I love to do as well as it can. Last Mermaid is a post-apocalyptic story in the real, our world. Like we've seen the San Francisco Golden Gate Bridge, for instance. It's got an unnamed, unnamed mermaid character who is in she's got a mech suit. She's in a bubble basically, and the bubble is carried by a mech that can turn into a car. It's got wheels, or it can be a robot and like climb mountains and stuff and fight things. She's got a little pet axolotl that adds some cuteness. Although I wouldn't say this is a young adult like cute book. It's a great little sidekick character, and it's somebody for her to talk to on a very lonely trek. This is like a road movie kind of a story. The artwork is gorgeous. The colors are gorgeous. Derek Kirk Kim has posted a few videos on his Instagram where he shows his process. He does do this with, a tablet and stuff, but it's really interesting seeing him like start with like really blocky shapes and just build and get something very, very round and organic. She has met one other, at least temporary ally, this mysterious guy, Torque, who's wandering the desert. And Torque claims that he has seen this certain statue. The unnamed mermaid believes that that's where her people are. So there's a lot of backstory we don't know yet. What's important is this is a survival story, trying to cross a desert with mutants and monsters and cannibals. And she's got this powerful mech, but she's also very vulnerable because she can't breathe outside of water. Like if this gets cracked, or the water also slowly turns more toxic every day, she has to get fresh water. She's in a very dangerous place. And anyway, so that's their mission right now. But I think so every once in a while you get sort of a water toxicity level, and she's going to have to change the water, or she'll basically suffocate in the water. They've decided that the fastest path and technically the least dangerous would be to climb these mountains because there's like roving bands of cannibals and stuff around there. But it's not an easy climb, and some bad stuff happens. I don't know if I trust Torque yet or not. I think I do. They're both fairly soft-spoken. They don't speak a lot. So we've got some mysterious characters. We've always got great action. You know, you can tell that this is a different format, dimension-wise, than your typical comic, right? Rectangle, square. And I think some of that has to have come from Derek Kim spent the last 10 years working in animation. He worked on shows like Adventure Time, big shows. And he did a lot of storyboards within that, as well as character design. And I think that the fact that he works in sort of a storyboard format has helped build this out as like a square box with, other squares and rectangles within it. It's a little different. Effectively, what it ends up being is, in my world, and I've said this before, it reads very manga-esque. It spends more time breaking down important actions instead of like, your typical superhero book tends to have like, Spider-Man swinging and he's giving like a whole speech, or, like the X-Men are fighting somebody and they're like, Beast, you go low on Mr. Sinister, while Iceman, you go high. And Gene, did you get us some baked goodies tonight? It's up to me, old Slim Summers, to figure out how to blast the diamond out of Mr. Sinister's eyes. And they'll have like all that dialogue while like characters are each doing a different action. It's like really condensed action in a lot of American comic books. Whereas this one, it takes its time. But the benefit there, while you'll read it kind of fast, potentially, it controls how fast you read the story. And it means that sometimes an action scene, you actually are sort of reading it like really fast. And then you'll pause when you get a bigger panel. You just do, because if you're reading small panel for a few pages, and then you get a big panel, you don't flip right by that. It literally makes you pause. So Derek Kim is very in control of the pacing of this story, in my opinion. And I like that. But also, another compliment. Look, I really like this book. Why is this not focusing? There it is. The designs he comes up with are great. Like these are some roving mutants, and one is on sort of like, some sort of mutated animal that has some armor on it, and another guy's just, in a high-tech motorcycle. So it's a very weird world. It's stuff we've almost seen before, but it isn't quite Mad Max, It isn't quite like anything else, fortunately. I want to say that there's a close-up of a bad guy in this that I liked. Let me see if I can find that. Some great action in this, though. Also, like, you can tell whose perspective we're seeing very fast, like a sort of an omniscient third person. They're in the desert sort of during sunset, more or less. But anytime it's a close-up on the mermaid for her reactions, we're seeing it through sort of that water. So obviously, like, the color palette alone helps break that up, like, visually real quick. Boy, I thought that there was a weird monster in this. I guess that there is, but like I think I've done something. I've taken this cover and I internalized that to think that there was also a close-up of like this guy in here, like a bigger panel, because I think that this is the same guy, or at least from the same band. Anyway, I love it. But let me be transparent with something. Derek has also said a lot of kind things to me, and I'll just put that out there because maybe I don't think that that's influencing my opinion. I'm trying to give you my honest opinion that I love this, but let me be transparent. And in something like this, somebody says that he found the comic from an interview we did on this show, and then like Derek does say a few nice things about this show. right here. So that's nice. That's kind of him. That is not why I'm giving it a good review, but that's just hinting at the next issue. I think that's an interesting. I'll say something about this, but I want to be transparent. If you feel that's the only reason Chris is saying that, you can believe that. That's fine. I'm putting it out there so you can make that decision. I can only tell you my honest opinions, but I can also be transparent, so that you can judge how much you believe my opinions. Okay. I look at this with this, person that's about 5 times the size of a regular person. And what I think of there is another post-apocalyptic manga. I don't think I asked Derek if this was an influence. It makes me think of Fist of the North Star. Because in this, Tetsuo Ohara tends to draw enemies like absolute massive monsters. I was trying to find an example. Here's a small example. There can be bigger things, but I'll put it here. This is the hero down here. And then this is just a typical bad guy, and he's way bigger. But there are other things where sometimes they're absolute massive like this. This is also a post-apocalyptic story, so I just thought I'd put that in there. I thought I'd find a better example just flipping through your average. Here's one. There's another big, massive bad guy. Here's a person, and here's him. So, the Mad Max post-apocalyptic stuff, a pretty obvious one to get right away, because we're dealing with a desert. We're dealing with a desert environment. But the humongous enemies of Fist of the North Star, I think, are also another influence. I would love, I bet I can ask him online or something and find out by the next time we do a review. But if you haven't read it, it's on issue 5. Boy, do I like this book. I read it fast. But I do tend to go back and then look at the art. It's pretty. The colors are very vibrant. And I know, this is something you get from sometimes being able to draw digitally versus coloring, just coloring digitally, but from traditional pencil and ink. Sometimes. I think that Derek has a great eye for color theory. I don't. I can color. I've got the technical skills to do it, but coming up with the right palette, I'm terrible at. My friend Mark Engler, I think, is also really good at coming up with the right color palette when he colors things. He colors like No One, for instance. This is a crime book, and you see sometimes he'll give a whole page a certain tint just so that we know that that's that part of a story. And the colors tend to be very muted because it's a crime book, it's not lots of vibrant stuff really, unless it's an explosion. Yeah, when it comes to coloring, there's more than one skill. There's the technical skill of being able to physically accomplish it. But then the color theory part, I feel like that's something you probably could learn to get better, but it's tough. Randy is an amazing creator, and I was glad to see what a cool guy he was in your interview with him. Very friendly. Makes sense. He worked in comics for 10 years, then he worked in animation for 10 years, which is not nothing. And now he's come back because he had an idea that he really wanted to do as a comic, and I'm rooting for him. I'm really. Bleeding Cool did get the original scoop on things like Scott Snyder, Jason Aaron, and Kelly Thompson. If he's released something new today, I didn't see it. I prefer coloring digitally because it lets me make more mistakes before finding the right color. I can understand that. I really can. It makes me also, though, I guess I don't have a good example of this handy. But if I go back to 1980s comics, where there wasn't as much rendering capabilities, and the colorist had to take into account that the paper itself wasn't going to show the color as vibrant. It was going to mute that color a little bit, but they knew that. and they would come up with a color palette that really suited that newsprint. Really, really interesting. Study classical painting for good color theory. My wife has, and she's good at that. I would just say that that's an area of artistry that I'm supremely lacking in. If I had more time, and someday maybe if I can retire, that would be something I would love to learn. I have all sorts of interesting like tools nearby that I can play with, from actual my wife has like acrylics and oils and stuff that we can paint with. And she's given me tons of things like, nice Copic markers that can blend well. She has wide, vast tools like pencils and crayons and all sorts of interesting things. But I just haven't had time to study it. Hey, Chris, just got back home from work and going to start the stream from the start. Love the show and all that you do. Keep it up. Much love. Thank you so much for the super chat. That means a lot to me. It really, really does. Yeah, I made an episode about that. And when they do sort of say an archive reprint, instead of using the original noted colors and printing those on the nicer paper, and I think people have been figuring this out, you need to instead just literally scan the original comic as high res as possible and then just print that on like the new paper, and it will show up as it was intended. My wife is okay. She's okay. She gets me HDMI cables when I need it. She, for no reason at all, buys me like, new pens to ink with for the show. She's okay. She's okay. She'll probably like cook a dinner, whatever. There's new news there. Got it. Yeah, I know what you're talking about. That was sort of like an intentional look at, or modern tools, but intentionally designed to look a little retro. Yeah. Anyway, I can't say enough nice things about this book. I really hope, if you haven't yet, maybe today this has convinced you to give it a shot. And if you have read it, I'd love to hear your thoughts, next episode or something like that. Really, really like this book. Another book I've enjoyed for a long time, but have been a little confused by lately is Radiant Black. Great superhero book, no question. I got a little confused because it's had some, not big, like it's not like it's been on hiatus, but it's had some delays while it's doing an event, the Catalyst War. There have been about sort of 5 months worth of stories for this. And because of some of those breaks, I had a hard time sort of remembering the exact details of all the supporting characters because also of one wrinkle. So Radiant Black is a power, okay? It's the name of a superhero, but it's essentially a power that is shared between two friends. They can each use it. There's Nathan. He's the more ambitious but creative person. He wants to be a screenwriter. And then there's Marshall. He's more of an underachiever, has stayed in the town that they grew up in, just works at a video store, but he also thinks outside the box in his own way. And he is a good friend. It's an Image comic, Moritaka, so it should be available at any comic book store that can order Image comics. I don't know what that would be over in Japan. I know of a couple places in Tokyo that sell American comics, but I don't know if they've decided to carry this or not, but they could order it. If you talk to a shop owner, they should be able to order any place that orders Image comics. Anyway, so I got a little confused. The Catalyst War essentially is these aliens that control this power that these guys ended up with. It doesn't really matter too much for the purposes of this review, that whole backstory. But these aliens have come to potentially conquer Earth, and they're putting Radiant Black through a series of trials to decide, if the world lives or dies. Those are the stakes, planetary. But the timeline split after part 1 of this, we started getting 2 issues a month with like a shared cover so that you know that it's sort of like this. One timeline is following Marshall as Radiant Black and how he reacts to these trials. And we learn sort of some more about who the catalyst aliens are in this issue. Marshall has basically won their trials, but at great cost. There's been something like 250,000 people in the world have been killed during these trials. And there's other people with radiant powers, and they and Marshall are at crossroads in this. Marshall decides that he's decided that these insanely powerful aliens will be allowed to sort of rule the world because it's essentially impossible to beat them. It's really harsh. And it ends with Marshall as Radiant Black looking up and seeing himself and Nathan, which means that in the parallel story where Nathan is the hero, Nathan has saved a lot more lives, but is technically not past the trials that these aliens have, and he's lost his father. But through a whole bunch of cosmic shenanigans that are just beautifully surreal, great color, great outside the box thinking in terms of how these mechanics work, they sort of go to the other reality. And who knows, like, what will happen here? You know, are they going to be combined? Is one of these realities going to win? I don't know. I literally cannot figure it out. But boy, did I find this exciting. And I found the characters so likable because they are faced with life and death decisions, and each of these guys make very different decisions, and they use different supporting casts across the 2 books, even though it's happening technically at the same time. It's out there, man. This is very ambitious, and I think that's why it's been a little slow to come out, because there's a lot to probably figure out behind the scenes with the mechanics of how this story would work, and to make it easy to then read, which it is in this issue. This is the easiest one to read, even though I'm giving you a lot of real weird cosmic stuff. I promise. Issue 29 and 29.5, really easy to get what's happening. Really easy to understand at this point. And it's fascinating to see 2 people tackle the same problems in very different but authentic ways. Each of them is drawn by a different person, but people that have been drawing the title back and forth since the beginning. And so, yeah, but you know, now they have to each draw monthly for several issues, and probably getting the schedules to align it's a lot to bite off. It'll read fantastic in trade paperback. It's so good, folks. It's so good. I've never read a story like this. So to Kyle Higgins, and he's co-writing this with his friend, another writer, Joe Clark, like, kudos. Just really ambitious storytelling. And since it's just their own thing, you know, it's not like in a shared Marvel universe where this would be an event that crosses over with everything else. It's all still just in Radiant Black. There's nothing else you need to read. It's interesting. It's really interesting seeing people make decisions and then have the consequences of those. And we can really weigh where the consequences are, because there's a different cause and effect on each story. So it really helps show you the scale. And I wouldn't necessarily want either of these timelines to end up being the right one, because either a bunch of innocent people have died, or, you know, one of the main characters who's really likable has lost his father. It's so rough. It's so tough. Have I considered creating my own superhero series? No, not really. I like superheroes. Obviously, I'm reading them. I do have a bunch of comic book ideas, but they're more like I've got some sci-fi and some horror ideas that I'd be more interested in exploring. Or someday, I keep saying it, like I might just do a one-shot autobiography that's like real life from that year that I dressed up like a superhero and ran around with Phoenix Jones downtown Seattle till like 3 a.m, 4 a.m, literally fighting crime. Just a crazy time in my life that does have some action and also has some behind the scenes drama and stuff like that. So we'll see. Let's see. Instead of doing 1 issue per month, they're doing 2. Delays make a lot of sense with that. Yeah. So it'll read really well in the trade paperback for whatever it's worth. How do you feel about Absolute Power? Well, I'm going to read that and go read that. I'm going to review that in a sec. So good question. Anyway, really good art. I love both of these artists. I really do. I think after reading this issue, I slightly prefer Marcelo Costa for this specific title. Just because of like, look at some of these trippy, surreal things that he does. That's like just like a painting or a poster in its own right. These two characters crossing a time stream, right? Doesn't that look cool? Look at like, that's not easy, by the way, to like actually figure out the foreshortening and the warping to like still make it consistent, to just make it look like it's all one organic image. I like that. There's a lot that I like about this book. Don't get me wrong. The artwork by Eduardo Ferragato is very good. Like, that's detailed. That's a great angle. There's plenty of great decisions for the storytelling. There's a lot of good emotion being portrayed on these pages. I have zero complaints. I'm just saying that I think I slightly prefer what Costa goes for with some of these decisions. Like, I really liked that I showed you, and I liked this sort of part where the two characters enter a donut shop and some weird cosmic timeliney stuff is happening. And I just like what they did. But let's give some credit to the colorist in this too. Rod Fernandez, some really vibrant colors that pop, which are totally appropriate. In this one, colorist is Rod and working with Raul Angulo. So it's very consistent. It's a consistent color palette. But anyway, these are great. What a story. I cannot figure out where it's going, and I like that. And I also like that this feels like an event, but it's all in one title. Thank God. Thank God. You know, that is literally what I was thinking of calling it, like, because I'm a big fan of Harvey Picard and his books like My Hollywood Year and Our Cancer Year. I was thinking My Superhero Year. So I would like to do that. I just don't want to draw it. I don't think I'm the right person to draw it. I'd be too close to it. Yeah. So kudos. Really ambitious storytelling. And I love seeing that kind of ambition in a superhero book that isn't a Marvel or DC thing, where I sort of know that the status quo will eventually look. As big a story as any Spider-Man or Batman story is, it is going to revert to a status quo at a certain point. They may kill off a certain supporting character permanently. They may, you know? But overall, it's going to revert to the status quo. But one thing that you get with Invincible, Savage Dragon, Radiant Black, it's never quite going to go to the status quo. That might not be for everybody, but I like that the story keeps evolving, that the characters keep evolving. And there's likely an end point. There was for Invincible. I feel confident that there will be for Radiant Black. For Eric Larson and Savage Dragon, I don't know. Let me talk about Absolute Power. I usually pick up an issue or two at least of an event book, but I typically don't get wowed by a lot of events anymore. It's just not my thing. But I do like this. Well, first of all, it's got a good creative team. Mark Waid can write this kind of stuff in his sleep. Dan Mora on art. And these two guys have been working together for 2 years on Batman, Superman. So they've had a lot of guest superheroes. So they can do this stuff in their sleep. But there's a cool premise to this. There's a cool premise. Look at this. Superman goes to stop a robbery on a roof, right? Bad guys shoot at him. We've seen that happen a million times before. But we haven't seen this. Superman's bleeding and falling. Not kryptonite bullets, regular bullets. So what's happened here? Something that they've been laying the groundwork with for a long time. Is the behind-the-scenes mechanics of the plot are Amanda Waller, right? High-level government official, has always run Task Force X, the Suicide Squad. She doesn't like superheroes, though. Well, in the recent comics, she's gotten access to two things. The Brainiac Queen, which is basically Brainiac's failed attempt at making himself a mate, but like incredibly powerful robot, okay? Can do just about anything. And Batman's failed sort of well, his name explains it. This is failsafe. And Batman made this sort of like robot to take him down if he ever went too far and like strayed from his goals. Failsafe is a little broken. Together, Failsafe and Brainiac Queen have taken the technology of Amazo, and that's always been a Justice League villain, a robot that could duplicate any of their powers, but has only been one robot, and they've made tons of them, okay? They've made tons of Amazos. So now each of these Amazos can take the powers of that superhero. On top of that, here's what I loved about this, okay? The news, all of the news around the world starts broadcasting footage of superheroes killing people throughout the world. And so people are scared. All of the news, anywhere you turn, that's what it's telling them. And like, so Animal Man and his daughter, like, have been away somewhere or other. They end up in Keystone City, and a mob just starts beating them. Because everybody's terrified of superheroes. But why is that happening? Amanda Waller has had Brainiac Queen hack every news organization and using AI imagery to show superheroes killing people. And if that's all people are seeing from every single place, yikes, there's no one to counter that narrative. Like, that's a really scary idea, in that, like, okay, the gimme is that like a bad guy could take over all of the news. But I could just about buy, a terrorist organization doing one really good fake video that like made us doubt, say, a world leader or a police officer or something like that. By saying the gimme, I'm saying like, okay, in a story, give me like a far-fetched element, and I'm going to give you that, like, at least one as like your wild premise that everything can be built on, like, otherwise it, like, you could argue, oh, well, that wouldn't happen because of XYZ. I'm like, right. But then you don't get a story. So that's the gimme. I'm like, okay, I'm giving you that one. That's what I'm saying. But what a scary idea, in a way. Like, it's so simple, but it's a good idea for like to make the people turn on the superheroes, because this is a world where there's mind control and clones and stuff like that. So yeah, if everybody, just like every news source, was just constantly broadcasting Superman and Firestorm and Donna Troy and stuff, like killing people, yeah, you would be scared of it. So that seems to be, like Amanda Waller's chess move, right? Is turning the people against the superheroes. That's what Batman thinks. But what Batman doesn't realize is that was actually just a distraction so that she could unleash all these Amazos and steal everybody's powers. So now you've got, this is a good story worth telling. What makes a hero a hero? Is it their powers, Or is it something more? Is it their personality and their intelligence and their willpower, their perseverance, things like that? That's what we're going to explore. That's what we're going to explore is how can these heroes rally and be heroic without the thing that you would think defines them? Well, hopefully at this point, they're a little more well-rounded than that, right? I like the idea. Also, it's only 4 issues. Good, fine. I know that there's plenty of tie-ins and stuff like that. As long as I can get the main story in 4 issues, I'm in for something like that. I'm in for something like that. I think it's a good story worth exploring of coming up with a way that a villain could distract and people and then like sort of just take their powers, fine. But the idea of figuring out what makes a superhero a hero without the superhero, without the super part of it, I like that idea personally. I feel like Amanda Waller, though, in terms of her design, ever since somewhere around the New 52, they really slimmed her down. She used to be a stout, shorter lady. And I appreciated that, like, that was a very different sort of body type for such an important character. And they've sort of slimmed her down. I wouldn't say like, she's a supermodel or anything along, but she's not quite the same as she used to be. Like she looks literally like, is it Viola Davis that plays her in the movies? I think that's who plays her. That's how Dan Moore is drawing her. It's fine. It's a quibble. I found it interesting back in the day when Amanda Waller was first introduced that she was just a character that you wouldn't necessarily look at and be like, I'm afraid of you. You're so big and strong and everything. It was her mind that was always the danger, and her very loose morals, her willingness to break rules that the average person wouldn't. Yeah, when they first introduced her in New 52 Supermodel, they revised that and they got something between the two. And I was just saying it, but honestly, that's a quibble. It's a quibble. Yes, this is not their new. I talked about this earlier that could be confusing because they're using the word too casually and too close together. They've got an absolute line that they're about to formally announce at San Diego Comic-Con. It's kind of like an Ultimate Universe. That's the rumor. This storyline is just called Absolute Power. It's both titles are fine, but to release 2 unrelated things so close together, not great. Unless there is a connection that I haven't figured out yet, because we haven't gotten the full details, to be fair, on the Absolute Universe. Maybe it spins out of this? I don't see how that would happen, because they explicitly, like, Amanda Waller has used, the computing power, for instance, of like Brainiac Queen and stuff to think ahead, and they've shut down access to the multiverse and to time travel and to Atom's shrinking technology. She had a meeting with some sort of like Federation of Planets in here to bar them from coming to Earth's aid. So all the sort of escape routes in this situation are cut off. Fine. That's cool. Yeah, where she has the talk with Sarge Steele, she's completely lost the ability to feel hypocrisy. It's a bad thing if the heroes have absolute power, but totally fine if she has it. Yes. No, she's a hypocrite. That's what sort of makes her a villain. I do feel like there's a small possibility that like we'll have a twist where this Amanda Waller is either, say, mind controlled by the Brainiac Queen, or she's from a parallel universe that's willing to go further than Amanda Waller's gone before, because Amanda Waller's been immoral and like, will sacrifice, villains like left and right, but she's never quite like wanted to take over. You know what I mean? So there is a change going on there. There is something changing. But the art, I haven't even talked, and I'll just say, like, Dan Mora can draw the hell out of superheroes. Like that's a great 2-page splash. It's a really great dynamic angle. And then he probably didn't need to do it, but he's got a really detailed drawing of the Big Ben clock and tower and bell. I like that. Some really exciting angles. Maybe the coloring on this is overwhelming the art a little, but it's not bad. I liked it. As far as other things that I read this week, I don't want to go too far in depth, but Scarlett is interesting because it's exploring the Energon universe, Arashikage ninja clan. That's always been an important element of the comics. I like the individual drawings by this artist, Marco Ferrari. Marco Ferrari does great individual drawings, but I would say that I don't feel like the panel-to-panel action always makes complete sense to me. It's not bad. I'm not trying to say that it's bad. It's just sometimes it's confusing. I'll give you this one, okay? So a couple ninjas jump in to attack Scarlett, and I think that this is her kicking a chair up and then kicking the chair to hit them. But this motion, how do you stomp the floor to make a chair pop up that high? And then it looks like she's almost on the ground because of how they've, the artist Marco put this leg sweep motion covering her other leg. So it looks like she's almost lying down while kicking this instead of up at this height. I might have argued put her in almost the same dimensions here to show a leg sweep across instead of shifting the angle down a little lower and covering up that leg. If we saw the bottom of this leg on the other side of the leg sweep, that might have read a little more clearly. Maybe I'm nitpicking. I just felt like it was a little confusing to me. But the individual drawings I really like. Oh, and the storytelling by the writer, Kelly Thompson. Kelly Thompson I always like. I really do. I like this. So Scarlett has been captured at the beginning. And she says, the ninjas tied her up and they figured out that she had a lockpick embedded in her lip. And they found that. But she's glad because that distracted them from figuring this out. She literally, Scarlett rips open some stitches on her side and pulls out a little blade, and that's what she uses to get herself out of her her situation. I like that. Scarlett's willing to take a little bit of pain to think ahead for a clever way to escape, and she doesn't rely on just one method. She's got a backup plan. Okay, that's pretty cool. Good writing by Kelly Thompson. Good art. It's fun. I said more than I thought I would. You see what I see in that? That action panel is a little confusing. I'm not saying it's bad, just a little confusing. Okay, a few other people agreeing. I appreciate it that hopefully I'm at least making myself clear, but I am a little curious about where they go with this too. I like the dialogue and stuff that Kelly Thompson does. In this, basically the backstory is Scarlett and Jinx used to be friends. Jinx disappeared. Scarlett is going on a mission to find her, and Jinx seems to be working undercover in the Arashikage clan or something. I don't know. There's something very confusing going on there. We'll see. It's good. Do I want to say much more? I'm not going to go too into this either, I don't think, but I will say that this issue of the Holy Roller, issue 7 of 9, funniest issue yet. It's just got really funny dialogue. Now, Rick Remender has always been a good writer, but keep in mind, he's also writing this with Joe Troman and Andy Samberg. And when you read it, you really can't help but see the main character as Andy. It just reads in a sort of Andy Samberg voice, but that's fine. There's some funny stuff in this where there's a mind-controlled wolf going after the main character, the Holy Roller, right? And he's he doesn't want to hurt the dog, so he's asking Siri, he's is this an endangered species, and she's like taking her time, and then he accidentally kills it by using the wrong gimmick bowling ball, and then the Siri finally says, yes, that is on the endangered species list, and he's like, darn it. There's also some funny stuff like where he rescues a family and explains to them what's going on, that like all people with a certain app are being driven insane. But the little kid goes, okay, boomer. He's like, because he goes, what's going on? Everyone's phones are making them insane. Okay, boomer. Kid could be grateful that he's getting rescued. Instead, he's like, he hears that phones are dangerous and he calls him a boomer. Funny dialogue. He's already a what do you call it? A bowling themed superhero. Well, he gets a sort of a sidekick here, like this mentally damaged guy that has a suit with pudding, including acid pudding. And then his fat genius best friend, who's been making him all the armor and weaponry, also shows up, and he's calling himself Mecha Shadow, which doesn't mean anything, but it's funny. It's legit funny, is what I'm trying to get at. Before I don't need to break down the plot and everything. This issue was the funniest issue so far. I feel like this is done as a concept to potentially have Andy play this in live action, and honestly, I'd be fine with that. It seems like it would work. We'll see. Oh, one other funny thing I'll hint at. There's an AI Hitler that's been updated for the modern day. And so he's like talking about how, to appeal to the right people, he can like be cute baby Hitler or cowboy Hitler, sexy, busty Hitler. He could be something like that turns into a tape recorder or a car, or a princess. I was like, all right, that's a little funny too. I haven't finished this, so I don't have a big opinion yet, but I wanted to try one of these $10 compact comics, and this one I hadn't read, but always heard good reviews of. It's a self-contained 12-issue story by sci-fi writer N.K. Jemisin, art by Jamal Campbell. So far, so good. It's a good sort of... it's like a crime procedural mystery type story, but if it was done maybe like in almost like a cowboy story where you're on the frontier, you're so far out that you've got no other resources, but it's sci-fi. It's out on like a super far away planet with a lot of different cultures that are very not human. Like they don't have emotions the same way, for instance. It's not just physical. The only thing I will say, it's easy to read. I have no problems, but it is shrunk from its intended size just a little, but you can see. So that the art is all still clear. The text is a little smaller than what you might be used to. Because if they envisioned it originally in this format, they probably would have made the text take up a little more real estate on the art. Instead, they've shrunk everything. But it isn't radically shrunk. It isn't like I'm going like, here. What's it say? And I don't need bifocals. I'm just saying that is one difference because of what they've decided to do with this format. But I like the value, so I'm willing to accept that it's not quite designed like that. I'm willing to go with that. I don't know. Should I ink, or we're already over 2 hours? We're already over 2 hours. Darn it. I sketched out, this was meant to be Thundercracker. I thought I got a kind of extreme angle on like this, and was going to have him like flying in. I don't know. I think I'm going to wrap the show up instead. I'm sorry. I want to draw. I really do. It's my therapy. It's my therapy, so I need to do it. But it's been over 2 hours, and Chrissy says ink. Oh, really? I'm hopeful for the new Alien movie. I like Fede Alvarez's Don't Breathe and his Evil Dead movie, so I've got a little bit of hope on this one. Okay, I didn't expect people to care. If if you're interested, I'll do a little inking then. All right. Yeah, sure. I haven't done it in a little while, and this could be relaxing. But do I have anything else to talk about in terms of like topics? I'm not sure that I do. I'm going to get some technical pens since this is a transformer, but I'll really only be using that for things like, facial details and things like that. I'm going to grab this new brush that I've got for like the outside stuff, because I don't know if it's clear, but look, I'm no Daniel Warren Johnson, but I was trying to simplify the design. I'm not showing sort of like all the circuitry and seams. I was trying to deal with big blocky shapes. Big blocky shapes is what I was going for. I was looking for whether I had scissors down here to open up this new brush pen. All right, let's see what kind of questions we've got, because I'll definitely take questions. Do an episode, oops, all drawing. Maybe I will at some point, because I have done art live streams, just not in a while. Let's see. She wants me to stay in the basement. Maybe she does. True story. Thundercracker was named for Tom Brevoort's farting issues in the Marvel office. I'm not sure I believe that. I'm not sure about that. Have I seen G.I. Joe Renegades? No, I'm aware of it, but actually no. My G.I. Joe knowledge is very much about the 80s to 90s toy line and the Larry Hama comics and the Marvel / Sunbow cartoon of the 80s. Those are the areas of G.I. Joe that I feel I know well, but I haven't watched any of the other cartoon takes really. So let's just, and I'll feel like I can't really make any mistakes if I'm just going to kind of try to go quick so that there's some energy to the lines. I hope that works. We'll see. We will see. Anybody else out there draw lately? Let's see what we've got for questions. We aren't judging, we are supporting and appreciate your company. I appreciate you guys' company. Still working on your graphic novel. Love hearing it. Love hearing it. Sorry, hold on. Going in order. I'm doing a noir cat detective parody in an old newspaper strip format. I don't think anybody else will have accomplished that yet. So good for you for finding something unique. Used the comic artist Dan Barry's handmade pens. I'll have to look those up. I don't know about that. Undercrackers is a fairly popular English slang term for underpants. Undercrackers, huh? I think I secured an account on Kara, but I haven't had time to play with it yet. Keep working, because if I take too many questions, I don't get anything done. Dog. I've been drawing conclusions and drawing straws. Nice. Love the show and the drawing looks awesome. Have you ever thought about doing prints of your art? No, I have to admit I haven't. But I also haven't gotten table space at a convention in well over a decade. I don't really have much to sell there. it's always sort of mostly a money thing. Like, because I don't want to draw it myself if I do any comics. I want to hire a good professional artist, and I want to pay them a fair wage. And I just don't feel that I have that indisposable income right now. That's all it is. That's what I'd like to do. I have an episode of Comic Tropes that will be out soon. I know that this one is taken longer than some. It's a little longer than most in terms of, but I have recorded it. I've edited more than half of it. I think I have to work tomorrow, my other job, but I think I should have it ready pretty damn soon. Maybe Wednesday. And I'm excited about it. I really do think it's a good one. I hope everybody ends up liking it. It's about one of my favorite artists. So, I put pressure on myself to do something that I'm really proud of in terms of the analysis. And I'm always feeling like I fall short, but yeah, so I've got something coming there. Oh, I didn't know there was a trailer for Marvel's Agatha already. Didn't know that. I have not read the collections. I read Howard the Duck in terms of back issues at one point, but I haven't read collections, so I haven't read in a while. Hey, Jason, nice to see you. Hope things are going well for you guys in the Jason's part of the Ink and Drink crew in is it LA, or is it it's more specific than that? I always forget because I'm just bad at names, but they've done some great comics. Jason and his group. Let's see. I was seeing if I maybe had any of your comics nearby. They've got a really funny one called Juggy and African Horn Man. That's pretty good. Anyway. Long Beach, right? The Long Beach Ink and Drink crew. No, my comic stores that I go to only had the first issue, so that's one I hope to find someday in trade paperback. Just happens sometimes, depending on where you are. Now that I think of it, Thundercracker, I think, was the first Transformers toy I ever got as a kid. So, just sort of always been a design that I really love within Transformers. A jet, a fighter jet, just always found really cool. And hopefully this will start to get some depth once I can swap out for some smaller pens. I'm just sort of trying to block in some of the bigger shapes real quick. I know I'm not catching every comment. I'm sorry. It's always a mix. I believe that they were F-15s, yeah. Guy Ritchie would have made a film about a group. Can't see him doing a solo here. Oh, you're thinking theoretically if he did a Marvel movie? Yeah. He would probably be good. He does do a lot of times big casts, so that's not a bad idea. Him on a new Guardians, or I don't know if Avengers would be right, but maybe some sort of more I'm trying to think of what kind of word I'm searching for here. Thunderbolts I saw was suggested, and that's kind of a good idea. You know, like not the main crew, like sort of the B squad. Some people that could be a little bit of a screw up. I'll take over that with a thinner pen, but yeah. What else is being talked about? I get most of my recommendations from pros and cons. Well, that's nice of you. I wish I could read everything, but have to make choices. You think so? I'm not sure what to make of it yet. Just joined, and if anybody already mentioned this, please ignore the Black Label. We did talk about Black Label Starman earlier in the show. Yeah, I missed a super chat. Excuse me, Steve. I love hanging out with the troopers and your inking. Thank you for the kind words, and thank you for somebody telling me that I'd overlooked that. Was not trying to. I haven't lately, but I definitely have. There's a bunch of there's at least 2 apps that I have that allow you to borrow books from the library, and the reason I haven't is I don't have a current library card. That's the only thing that's keeping me from doing some more comic reading from the library. But yeah, I have it. I think it's a fantastic tool. Boy, it's. How do I do this? Okay, if I'm gonna like lean over like this, here I'm gonna rearrange things. Yeah, Hoopla is a good one. Let me see if I can. Oh, I thought that this could bend more. There. Now I'm not leaning completely out of frame when I lean down to ink. Hopefully that's a little better. Jim and I recorded a new trash movie bonanza. That's over to our editing guru, Jamie. So that'll come out, and I think that will be a very fun one. I won't hint at what that is yet. I saw a couple movies recently. I saw Maxine, which I'd call good, but not great. Maxine is technically the 3rd movie in a trilogy, although one of them was about a different character. It was a prequel. It was decent. It was just trying to do too much, but it was still interesting. Good episode idea is Chris getting a library card. Probably so. That's really cool. I love Naoki Urasawa. I love Kentaro Miura, and one of the slightly more recent ones that I got into big time is Takehiko Inoue. Loved Slam Dunk. I'm currently reading Vagabond. I need to find like a good I guess I am reading a fair amount of manga. I was thinking like I need another, because it's like it feels like Spy Family and Asadora. Those are 2 of my favorites, but it feels like those are coming out so slowly. So yeah, I would like to see some more of that. I need my ruler. I need my little ruler. So Maxine is okay. I also saw a really weird but kind of cool one last night after work. It's called Kill. It's an Indian movie. Uh, it's an action movie. And the cool thing about Kill was that it keeps escalating. Let me just. Oh yeah, Witch Hat Atelier. I've read some of the first volumes of that. I need to get back onto it, but I liked Witch Hat, and I heard that there was an anime coming out. I'll have to take a look at that trailer. So Kill is here's what it does differently than some Indian action movies. Very grounded. The kind of brutal kills that you see in something like The Raid or like The Raid. That's actually a pretty good example. The stuff that didn't connect with me as much, although I don't 100% blame it, is there's melodrama for like the relationship. Like the main character is a army commando. He's a real badass and stuff, but the love story feels like something out of a soap opera. Very, very ill-defined, we'll call it. There's not much to it. It just comes out of nowhere, and it always plays really sappy, which doesn't seem to fit tonally. But I also think that it's just an Indian movie convention. It's sort of like their version of tropes, essentially. I don't think that they're intentionally trying to be cheesy. I think it's like what connects for them. So that's okay. But like, what was crazy is the movie is like, it keeps like the main hero, like while he's brutal, he also gets his ass kicked so bad throughout the movie. So I kind of like that the hero wasn't just like, a Steven Seagal, like nobody can even touch me type thing. And then it's like a full hour into the movie, and like this big dramatic thing happens, and the title of the movie flashes up on screen. It was like well past the first act. It's like halfway through the movie, an hour into it. I was like, whoa, what's that mean? And sure enough, after that big dramatic moment and the title coming up, the action got even more brutal. It was so intense. It was just crazy. So I do actually recommend it, but go in knowing that there's going to be a few things just culturally that make it a little different than what you're used to seeing in an action movie. And you just sort of have to go with that if you want to sort of get to the action. And it all takes place on a normal train across like about 4 different coaches back and forth. It's a simple plot of like, a big gang of thieves, and the commando is on the train, and all of the fights therefore are taking place in very close quarters. Then it's not a luxury train with like, sleeper cars. It's like they just have a few bunk beds on each side and a very narrow hallway, and the fights all have to take place in there. So people are getting their heads slammed into like, hard objects all the time. Or the fights will be in like, the bathroom or over by like, the doors that connect the cars. It's insane how, it had some really cool action within it. That's the reason to potentially see it, but don't go expecting the character work to feel the same as an American action movie. Anyway. What? No, I've never heard that. There was an Indian remake of History of... Well, was it a remake of the movie, or was it another adaptation of the comic book, really? The movie is just called Kill. It's out right now. It's an Indian action movie. No, I do not get a rain of gold, but I like doing this stuff. I did see Monkey Man. And while that took place in India and has lots of Indian actors, it's also sort of like still kind of a Western movie, but it was good. Monkey Man was probably the better overall movie, but if you just want sort of like, a martial arts, like brutal type movie, maybe you haven't gotten that lately, that's what I'd say this is. Kill. I knocked over my Diet Mountain Dew and it's really fizzing loud at me, but that's its problem, not mine. All right, got to go a little faster, right? Otherwise, there's no energy. You've got kind of two different ways of drawing Transformers. Very technical, with lots of very precise lines, or you lean into the more sort of sci-fi, cartoony, alien aspect and just go with like big, bold lines and energy. And I wouldn't have really considered that too much before I read the Daniel Warren Johnson stuff, but boy, do I like it. That guy might be going places, if you ask me. Have you guys discovered any good new music lately? I never know where to find good music. Slumdog Millionaire was a Danny Boyle movie, yeah. So I feel like it depends who's making the movie as compared to where it's set and who it stars as to what you'd call it. So even though Slumdog Millionaire is intended to have some Bollywood trappings, I'd still think of it as a Western movie because it's by a British director, I did not have time yet to see his panel at Heroes Con. I would like to. Hi-Fi Rush's soundtrack is awesome. It's a video game. Haven't heard of it. If you're ever interested in looking up good metal bands, I'm your guy. I appreciate metal. I'm not an expert at all. Let me ask this as long as we're just sort of talking about music. I feel like in general, music hasn't, for like the 2010s and the 2020s, and I could be completely out of touch, I don't feel like the music from the 2010s and the 2020s has enough to make it feel distinct from previous eras. Like, I feel like I can listen to music and I'm like, that's 50s, that's 60s, that's 70s, that's 80s, that's 90s. And maybe it's that I'm getting older, or maybe just music hasn't gone through as big a tonal shift as it used to. I don't know, but that's sort of how I feel right now. I listen, and I'm not saying that anything about the music today, newer music that I've heard, is bad in any way. I just feel like I haven't heard any really distinct new sounds. Like, if I listen to 90s music, I can say there was grunge and there was, sort of there was a change in what hip hop was. With 80s, there's like new wave and synthesizers. There are new sounds. The 70s had funk, and the 60s was stuff like Beatles and Elvis. I don't know. I just feel like and I'm not saying that there aren't iconic artists today either. Somebody like, I don't know, Dua Lipa. She's good, right? She's fine. I'm not saying I'm a big fan or that I dislike it. I'm just saying, like, fine. I'm just saying I'm not hearing anything that like goes like, okay, that decade has a bunch of this sound. Although I will say, in retrospect, I said the 90s had like, grunge and a different hip hop. They also had alternative. The 90s didn't really know what it wanted to be, but it tried a bunch of things. It had like small mini eras within it a little. Everything sounds like Drake. I like Ariana Grande. Yeah, I like plenty of the music. I just feel and look, I've never been a guy that like knows how to play music, so I could just be wrong on this. I was just curious about other opinions. If you were like, no, in the 2010s the sound was XYZ, like that's what defined that era or something like that. And if that's the case, I'm willing to listen to that and learn. I just feel like I haven't heard a big change, but I also feel like there also hasn't been a big change in technology or stuff in the last like 20 years or more. Like if I go back 20 years, we had the internet and cell phone and stuff. It might not have been quite as fast, but we had all of that, you know? It's like it's not like new. It's better, but it's not new. It's not like, you know, eras where they were like, we went to the moon for the first time, or, you know, now we can cross the ocean. I don't know. Like, what technology wise have we created in the last 20 years that's changed society as compared to like a small evolution? I don't know. You know, social media has become more prevalent, but have we come up with anything? I'll even like in comics, we've seen a little bit of an evolution because there's more emphasis on some of the techniques that have come from manga. We've seen a lot of influence from Japan in our comics in terms of pacing and storytelling decisions. There's been a bit of an evolution there that I could point to. But maybe I'm just ignorant and I'm missing something big. If you have an example of something new that I'm not thinking of, I'd love to hear about that. Monster Energy drinks. Dubstep is dead. How about that? Sure. Early 2000s definitely belonged to rap metal and new metal. Yeah, I'd say that like that's and so I was going more for the 2010s and 2020s. And maybe we just haven't had enough distance yet to have, you know, the objectivity we need to say, oh, this is what happened. But I just feel like I'm not hearing or seeing too much that's new. I don't know. My concern is, you know, that I'm just imagining that because I'm getting older and I'm not in touch. But I I'm wondering if no, that like maybe we're more connected now, and so we look back more than we used to. We enjoy more retro things, and I wonder. I don't know, but I wonder because it's easier than ever to just still, you know, say stream an older show or movie or something, and then that's new to somebody. Just thoughts. I could be wrong. Deep thoughts with Chris and his live chat audience of geniuses. This is fun. This is relaxing. I need to do more of this. It's just healthy to do some form of art therapy. I never really liked to rose tint the decade that a piece of media came out. I love Spider-Man 2, but I can't stand the early 2000s. Glitch mob. There's definitely been a lot of looking back on musical styles as independently produced music has become more accessible. Science fiction exposed us to a lot of possibilities before they were ready. Stuff like robotics, AI, and genetic engineering are just getting to be important now, but we heard about them decades back. I'd say in a way that's always been true of writing, like coming up with those ideas well before mankind was capable of implementing ideas. You know, even back to Jules Verne or something. Just my take. What else am I missing? I've been listening to a lot of 80s stuff. Joy Division. It's a lot of noise about sadness, just like Nine Inch Nails. Joy Division's awesome, man. Speaking of decades' impact on media, remember all the media that commented on the Bush administration, the Ultimates, Minority Report, Civil War, Secret War, The Dark Knight. Yeah, I guess it did. Yep. When will we see a new wave of fiction like cyberpunk, steampunk, etc.? What do you think is next? If I could guess that, I'd be a rich man. I don't know. I don't know. It's an interesting question. If I was having a drink, I'd probably speculate on it for hours. I prefer Popeyes by far. KFC is fine sometimes, but Popeyes, I think that their chicken tastes better. Their biscuits are inarguably far superior. And it's just, I don't know. I just really prefer Popeyes. I guess I'll just leave it at that. Boy, now you got me thinking about Popeyes. How dare you? Ooh. You're my obsession. You're my obsession. Who do you want me to be to make you sleep with me? You know that song? I think it's Animotion. Not the biggest new wave hit, but it was up there. I'm going to need to take a break and eat something soon. What do I want to eat? I don't know. I don't even know. Cyberpunk was more of a movement than a genre. It had fashion and music and visual style along with the stories. A successor would need to be a cultural movement of that size. Maybe. That's your karaoke song? Man, I Melt With You. I've always enjoyed that song. I think it was only something like I don't know, I'll say 5 years ago or something, I learned that it is very much meant to be literal. Like, I am willing to melt with you. They were talking about the fears during the Cold War of nuclear bombs going off. And they're saying, like, I'm willing to melt with you. I always thought that it was like, I just listened to it, enjoyed it and stuff, and then and didn't think about it much. And then all of a sudden one day I listened to the lyrics. I was like, oh, modern English is literally saying they're willing to melt with you. I guess that's romantic, if also absolutely, utterly horrifying. That's something that we don't, I feel, think about as much for some reason anymore. At a certain point, maybe we just got burned out as a society, but growing up, when I was young enough, we did still have fears of, hey, any day now, somebody could say the wrong thing. And if one nuclear bomb is dropped, like both Russia and America are going to drop all their nuclear bombs and we're just going to be gone. And I mean, it feels like it still could happen, but we just don't think about it, or at least I don't dwell on it. I don't feel like I see a lot of media dwelling on that horrifically scary idea anymore. I guess the only comforting part about nuclear war is that if you're in the range of the blast, you're probably not going to feel it. No, that's true. We'll see. We'll see. I did talk about it earlier. We'll see. Maybe I should. I just need to sign up for a Skybound Insiders account. I haven't done that yet, actually. You would think that I would have one, but I don't. Thinking of Skybound, or Robert Kirkman specifically, very recently, all of a sudden it occurred to me that the Walking Dead comic has actually been over for a while now. And honestly, I think Robert ended it very well. I don't know. Different people are going to have different opinions on how the comic maybe could have ended differently. If it should have ended earlier, if they have more, like, if it overstayed its welcome. I think it ended at the right time. It was a surprise. And it ended the character's story where it needed to, while still leaving the world still in the, it was the zombie movie that never ends, was Kirkman's original pitch. And even though the comic did end, like, yeah, in a way, I don't know. I just, the more I think about it, the more I think he really did do a good job of ending it when he did and how he did. I think that not the final arc per se, but the final 2 issues, yeah, I think he nailed those. I think the final 2 issues were a really solid ending to a very popular comic. You disagree? No, I think it was a good ending. I think it was a really good ending at the right time. Yeah, well, maybe I'm a little biased. I mean, I'd been following it since before day one. Somewhere up in my room where I shoot the show, I've still got, like, some of Robert's pitches for zombie books before there was The Walking Dead, for instance. Yeah, but I think that The Walking Dead really ended the comic at the right point. Just really, really good. And I think I'd like to make an episode about it, actually. I don't know. That was just occurring to me somewhat recently. What are some comics that you think ended well? Like, and not a mini series. Like, for instance, we could all say Watchmen, but an ongoing book that did hit an end. There's a lot of Vertigo books, there's a lot of Image books, there's things like that. I don't know, even like you could argue, your Cerebus, things like that. What's a comic that ended really well? It's not that interesting to talk about proofreading the comics. It really, I'd make an episode about it if I could, but I don't think it's that interesting. I appreciate the interest. I just don't think it would be that interesting. Tokyo Ghoul. These are good comics that had a good ending. Okay. Starman. Irredeemable. Did the original Turtles run really have a good ending, though? I feel like it kind of just faded away. And then, it was the first 2 volumes, it came back as color, but so briefly. I don't know. Black Science. I get what you mean there. Dragon Ball. Yeah, Hellboy in Hell. I thought Preacher, great final issue. Yeah. I won't argue that every comic that was planned with an ending ends well. I think that some have much stronger ends than others. I'm trying to think. I liked how Why the Last Man ended. I thought that was a really good finale. That there was an emotional punch to everything, and a meaning. And 20th Century Boys by Naoki Urasawa. 20th Century Boys wasn't my favorite overall comic, but the ending really hit hard. Really, really good ending to that. There's probably a bunch of manga that has good ending because, yeah, a lot of it is intended to sort that becomes popular was intended to wrap up at a certain point, and that's good. It's cool. But has there been something that just haunts you, or made you cry, or made you angry, or you just keep thinking about it, like a comic that you just keep thinking about because it had a great ending? I feel like there's got to be a bunch. I'm sort of blanking on a great example right now is all. We Three, I mean, quick book, but yeah. It does, yeah. Urasawa's Monster might be my overall favorite story by him. Bone, yeah, that's a great example, actually. Bone did have a great ending. That's a good one. Yeah, of course, yes. The gold standard for storytelling in a video game, or just telling a story. I love both of The Last of Us. Yeah. Maybe it did. I'll be honest. I don't really remember the end of Ex Machina now that you say that. And I like a lot of stuff by both Tony Harris and Brian K. Vaughan. I don't really remember that. I actually haven't finished East of West quite yet, so not an expert on that one. Lock and Key. Yeah, I like that one. That's a good one. I totally agree. I literally still have the final issue of Slam Dunk because it's a really emotional, just really earned ending. Really earned. The characters have evolved and changed. Boy, great ending. Goodnight Pun Pun by Inyo Asano. Really? Thank you for the super chat. I've heard of that, but I've never read that one. Good to know. Yes, Shin Matthias, not highlighting the chat because I'm inking here, but I love the current anime movie adaptation of, what do you call it? Slam Dunk. It is a bit of a change because it focuses on a different character, but it's a great adaptation. Yeah, really like that one. Well, I've definitely gone longer than I expected to, but I'm having fun. I'm not going to be able to completely wrap up this drawing. I'm realizing there's a lot more that would need to be accomplished here to make this a complete drawing. Hopefully you get an idea of where it's going. Yeah. I wish I could do the whole thing, but you get an idea. Cool. Let me do this. All right. I think I'm going to end this. I'll go in and edit the video so that it has chapters. That's something I've been doing. So hopefully if you in the future miss an episode live, just know that you can skip to the stuff that interests you the most. So I'm going to go do that. Very fun talking to everybody. Yeah, that was we did a notch over 3 hours. I think that's plenty. And I got to ink a little bit of a roundy, more organic sort of robot. That was fun. Thanks, everybody. I will have a comic tropes up this week. We might have a new trash movie bonanza up this week. I think we can. And I'll be back on Monday with more news and reviews. So I'll look forward to talking to everybody then. Until then, I'll say the same thing I say on Comic Tropes. Keep reading comics. Take care, everybody.